Chapter 575. Motherfucker, what are you all looking at me for? Ree, the only paid guest of Jean G's live broadcast, really wanted to stay out of this matter. However, the continuous changes in the situation had already caused him to subtly separate from his peers, making him even more eye-catching. As the only live broadcast guest who could interact with the spectators in real time, he didn't even have the time to rejoice that he had escaped a fatal gamble. He had unavoidably become the target of the focus fire. God, Re, can you explain? This was a rather polite question. Hey, it's not good to take money and be in a daze, right? This was a rather harsh question. Mr. Honey Pot Mommy's boy, what else can you do besides spitting trash talk? If you have the money to raise a little Pekingese, you should at least be loud enough. This was a vendetta. When Re accepted the position of guest, he never thought that he would end up being cut apart by the host, the other guests, and even the guests of the other programs. The déjà vu of a little transparent creature hiding in a corner and barking suddenly became very intense. He really wanted to say something that would shock everyone. He wanted to insult Luo Nan once more. However, the current conversation on the rostrum in the round conference room was something that only those powerful individuals who were able to fight in the abyss could personally experience in his cognitive system. Of course, he could explain, but wouldn't that be the same as licking Luo Nan's stinky feet? Then he really wouldn't release a little Pekingese. Bah! Right at this moment, a clanging sound suddenly rang out from his room. As a B-rank psychic, Re didn't need to turn his head to know that it was the sound of the curtains that weren't closed properly. The passing hurricane had blown them up, knocking over the furnishings in the living room. Jean G was located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It was surrounded on all sides by the sea, so there was a lot of rain. After the Third World War, the global climate changed, and a few other factors made this situation more common and more intense. Ree could have ignored it, but he just happened to need a reason to buffer himself from the awkward situation on the internet. Cough. It's raining heavily outside. I'm going to close the window. As he spoke, he forced himself to ignore the comments in the live broadcast room and the forum. He got up and left the range of the camera. After leaving the area, Re immediately felt his body relax. The cold sweat that he forcibly held back just now poured out. But the problem was, what about after closing the window? What should he do next? Was there a power outage? Before he could think of a way to get out of this predicament, his sensitive mind already knew that the man with the spray bottle was up to something again in the round conference room shown by the live broadcast. Probably because he had been oppressed by the energy turbulence in the abyss and felt a little uncomfortable, that guy played a new trick. He used the condensation ring formed by the thousands of participants he hypnotized to infiltrate the conference room and even outside the Shangding building. Alright, this wasn't some sort of trick, but rather an extremely exquisite operation. It was similar to replacing a peach tree with a peach tree, but it was also like defending against an enemy outside of the country. The impact of Ghost Eye's crushing force was transferred to the thin veil of water mist. There was an additional buffer zone, and there was also too much space for subsequent operations. Ree was in the living room, staring blankly at the curtains that were fluttering in the wind. She was not in the mood to clean up the messy living room. In fact, this kind of thing was naturally handled by the AI butler. It was not up to him. His body was idle, but his mind was in a mess. Ree was also a grade B expert and had a good teacher. Her cultivation and knowledge were not ordinary. Of course, she knew that this move of Luo Nan's looked simple and clear logically, but in reality, it was very difficult. When she was in a good state, she was also able to stay and cultivate in the abyss. But when it came to actual combat, it was already quite good to be able to hold on for 60 seconds of eruption. And in these 60 seconds, she could only go straight against Ghost Eye. It was impossible to be like Luo Nan, to be in a deadlock with Ghost Eye, or even to create changes during this time. This move of Luo Nan's already involved the effective use of the environment in the abyss. According to Gong Chi's words, this could not be done without the power of a domain. Domain? Ree was more and more afraid to return to the live broadcast room. There was only one thought left in her absent-minded mind. What else can Luo Nan do? What else can I do? Luo Nan also had this question in his heart. The game with Ghost Eye in the Abyss concerned the outcome of the bet, but it was not within the scope of his concern. In fact, whether it was the standard verification of 60 seconds or 15 seconds, he had already passed long ago. The reason why the two sides were still confronting each other in the abyss wasn't because Ghost Eye was thick-skinned. It was because Luo Nan was shameless. As mentioned before, it was really rare to have such a high-level, capable, and proper sparring partner. Ever since Ghost Eye's long-range attack across space, various magical abilities and methods were equivalent to the basic attack patterns of extraordinaries in the abyss. One by one, they appeared before Luo Nan's eyes. The truth was quite consistent with Luo Nan's expectations. Luo Nan was no longer a rookie who had just stepped into the inner world. Even though it had been less than 3 months at most, the high-level battles he had experienced during this time had already surpassed the sum total of many ability users in their entire lives. The logic world of Frost River reality, the planar crossbow of Ku Wang's communication, and the direct assassination of Jin Tong in the Outer Sea. There were as many as 3 confrontations that extraordinaries had directly participated in. In particular, he himself was sinking deeper and deeper. Whether active or passive, he had accumulated a wealth of precious experience. He had a clear reference. In addition, he could see the entire picture of the abyss and the polar regions. He could also see the rules of the twisting curtains. He could see not only the scenery, but also the skill. Several reasons were stacked together. When Ghost Eye made his move, Luo Nan immediately found a reference in his memories. He sorted out the corresponding rules and verified the thoughts in his heart. Sure enough, whether it was President Ouyang's logic world, Luo Yuan's planar crossbow, or Ghost Eye's long-range attack, they were all essentially the same. They all used special formats to interfere with special environments to form special scenes. The only difference was the degree of completion. The logic world had the highest degree of completion. Its laws were strict. The planar crossbow's interference power was extremely strong. It was the most lethal. As for Ghost Eye, he was the most casual in comparison. He had more or less stripped away the material plane of the energy transportation environment. He had only set up a basic structure in the abyss, but he had fully utilized the particularity of the abyss to make his attack simpler and more direct. Well, the abyss was a place that could not be ignored in the end. Right now, it seemed that the 3rd floor was no more than a prison. Though the polar regions were good, they were still a bit too far from the real plane. Only the abyss, this wondrous dimension, could accomplish many things. It gave Luo Nan Tuan new, perhaps it should be said that it made up for the part that was lacking in his system. His soul cloak and his deep-sea scene seemed to fit into the special environment and special power of the abyss to achieve twice the result with half the effort. I really want to give it a try. Then let's give it a try. As a researcher, Luo Nan was very clear on how important inspiration was. He had Ghost Eye as a test subject with enough weight and restraint. No, an experimental partner. How rare was that? How could he let Ghost Eye leave under these circumstances? Ghost Eye, that old bastard, was quite generous. He really did accompany Luo Nan to play along. Of course, Luo Nan's confrontation with Ghost Eye was mostly just for absorption. Even moving the mist muslin was just a small test. The current Xia city was absolutely not a good place to truly verify the soul cloak and the deep-sea scene. To verify Luo Nan's most fundamental self-format. A total of 5 extraordinaries were paying attention to Luo Nan. They were paying attention to the blood wool bracelet. They were paying attention to the gathering of thousands of people. They were paying attention to the towering fortress that slowly set sail under the cover of the night. Every detail of the changes inside and outside of the fortress was brought under a magnifying glass for analysis. Not a single detail could be hidden from people. Needless to say, Luo Nan's cobweb altar was inextricably linked to this fortress. Every second that the fortress existed in the abyss brought a wondrous force to the cobweb altar. Even if the human-faced arachnid was hidden deep in the polar region and could effectively avoid the fortress, Luo Nan would still need to draw a few more times to verify the fortress in this environment, no matter how big his heart was. The Xia City region was not a place for experimentation no matter what. Luo Nan could only shift his thoughts outwards. In any case, the range of his soul cloak had already expanded by several thousand kilometers in the past week. He could not do it in Xia City, but he could do it in the boundless wastelands and the ocean. Luo Nan would not let go of this learning and verification process. He slowly exhaled. His mind underwent the arrangement of the overall planning technique, cleverly dividing it into two sets of staggered mission sequences. One was in Xia City, absorbing nourishment like a thirst. The other was in the distant Pacific Ocean, learning and practicing on the spot. He was a beginner. There were successes and failures, but his capital was robust. His train of thought was correct. Luo Nan could afford to wait. He could afford to play. He could afford to train. He could afford to do several rounds of verification. Even though his mental exhaustion was quite large, he still gradually brought out the rules and regulations. He had not spoken for several minutes already. The tens of thousands of spectators, including He Yueyin at his side, all thought that he was doing his best to fight Ghost Eye in the abyss. They were completely unaware that half of his energy had already been divided 7,000 kilometers away. He was tossing and turning in the Pacific Ocean where mutants wreaked havoc. Luo Nan could not avoid adapting to this marvelous method of use while he was verifying and practicing. Unlike the monotonous cloud world where reality and illusion were indistinguishable, Luo Nan's consciousness wandered the earth. The first thing he sensed was a natural scene that was much more colorful. Other things aside, he sensed the state of light and darkness in different time zones at the same time. He was presented with an inconceivable macroscopic perspective. In this moment, it was as if he was stroking the soft and bumpy surface of the ocean and the earth. He was swimming freely within the uneven thickness of the clouds. He was feeling the high-speed rotation of the planet within the void of the universe. It was under the touch of such a marvelous scene that Luo Nan's sense of space had a marvelous distortion. A subtle change occurred in his observation of the real world. Luo Nan didn't know when it happened, but he suddenly felt a bit absent-minded. An inexplicable thought was born, and it quickly magnified. Where am I? What kind of perspective am I using to observe this world, this planet, this universe? When doubts were about to fill his entire train of thought, the seed of an answer that had long been buried deep in his heart broke out from the ground. 3 long lines shot out together. They pierced through the boundless, penetrated the dim and bright, and penetrated the existent and the non-existent. They constructed a classical Cartesian coordinate system, locking Luo Nan himself at the origin. He was at a loss. He was cold. He was here, but he had nowhere to rely on. It was as if he was isolated from the world. From Luo Nan's perspective, the answer was not surprising. It was merely a single me. Aside from this, all thoughts and distractions were discarded. They were discarded like worn-out shoes. And it was precisely after he clarified this fundamental principle that a marvelous curve suddenly appeared in the world within Luo Nan's eyes. Chapter 576. The mess in the living room had already been cleaned up by the AI butler, but Ree was unwilling to return to the live camera no matter what. Even if the live broadcast platform wanted to argue with him about the contract and ask him for compensation, he would accept it. Just as he made up his mind, a communication wave penetrated through the wind and rain and came in. The one contacting him was the young man that his teacher, Gong Qi, had been nurturing for the past few years, Yuan Fei. This person was very lively and reliable. However, Ree didn't like him for no reason. At most, it was because the same sex repels each other. Yuan Fei had a smooth sailing life under Gong Qi's guidance in the past few years. It was only when he messed up his business in Xia City that he came back dejectedly. Ree was happy for a few minutes because of this. Now that he thought about it, maybe he should give Luo Nan a drumstick first. That would make things more balanced. It was fine not thinking about Luo Nan, but thinking about that person made his mood sour. For a moment, Ree wanted to refuse the call with the reason that he was doing a live broadcast. But when he thought about how his every move could be said to be the center of attention, he couldn't hide the fact that he had temporarily left the table, so he could only answer the call with a toothache expression and said indifferently, "Hello. Senior Brother Luo, I wanted to contact you but I was worried that you were doing a live broadcast." Re's toothache intensified. "What the hell are you staring at me for? Are you trying to snitch on me in the future?" And such a hypocritical and respectful form of address. Who knows what the other side is like? No matter what, it was unlikely that Yuan Fei would open a video call with Re to verify the degree of respect behind the form of address. Of course, Re would do the same. The two of them pretended to communicate using traditional communication methods. Senior Brother Luo, headquarters just held a joint conference. The president, the vice presidents, and the secretaries all participated. But the teacher is still absent. Re furrowed his brows. Calling him teacher so intimately, have you confirmed your relationship? You haven't even offered him tea. Aren't you ashamed to talk about it? Re was in a bad mood and was in no mood to respond. He said coldly, "The teacher is in seclusion. Of course he doesn't have time." Which extraordinary ranked almighty did not take months to comprehend absolute arts. He has to leave seclusion after a meeting. What can he do in the end? But this involves Xia City's latest stance. I heard that someone has already proposed to ease the relationship with Xia City. A joint development or something. Once that happens, it will be difficult to make changes. Teacher, Re's chest tightened when she heard that. The photo of Jean Tong's headband was still going viral on the internet. Could the people from headquarters stop their greed for money? Even if you want money, you need to be alive to spend it, right? Looking at it from another perspective, the reason why a bunch of old fogies with their necks buried in the soil were working so hard was most likely because they wanted to extend their life with money to spend a little longer. A breakthrough cultivation theory did indeed have the opportunity to achieve this. That was what he thought, but he would never agree with Yuan Fei's words. He immediately put on the airs of a senior brother and scolded, "You've been working in the association for a long time, and you even have a position. Why are you spreading rumors? What does the association want to do? What does the teacher want to do? Do we need you to report it? You should learn from me and go into seclusion for a few more days. Cultivating and comprehending is the right thing to do." It felt much better to have someone to vent his anger on. No matter how scheming and shrewd Yuan Fei was, he couldn't calm down for a while after being forcefully rebutted by Re. He stiffly replied, "Senior brother, I'm busy with a live broadcast. I won't disturb you any longer." Then he hung up. The relationship between the two sides would most likely be frozen for a period of time. Re didn't really care. He had his family backing him. His starting point, achievements, and background, including his relationship with his teacher, Gong Qi, and their mutual interests, all of them crushed Yuan Fei. Yuan Fei only had a slight advantage in age and a bit of potential that hadn't been realized yet. If they really clashed, Yuan Fei wouldn't amount to shit. But some people had some words that only disturbed people's hearts. Yuan Fei's reminder caused Re's train of thought to deviate a bit. He vaguely knew why his teacher had to go into seclusion. Some time ago, he had been ordered to hire professionals to search for the location of Snake Tongue's true body. It seemed that his teacher had set up a trap on Snake Tongue's missing soul body. He could retrieve the face he lost in Xia City. However, Snake Tongue was cunning and intelligent. She was also cautious. She had hidden her true body extremely well. He hadn't completed his task. He was originally worried that he would be reprimanded, but he didn't expect that there would be no follow-up. It seemed that Gong Qi had really gone into seclusion. He hadn't replied for a month. He had even gone to the point of fasting. Only the nourishment cabin responsible for maintaining his life was still operating. Re was actually a bit worried. After all, Gong Qi had turned his seclusion, which was supposed to be a cover, into a real one. He had turned important matters that involved his face and personal interests into a fake one. It was quite inconsistent with his usual meticulous planning to the point of being cruel and ruthless. He felt that he had encountered some unexpected situation. So Ree had bitten off more than he could chew when it came to the matters of dripping sword and sprinkler man. He had even continued to expand his influence. He wanted to probe the situation over at Xia City. The entire inner world knew of his relationship with Gong Qi. If his teacher were to suffer a great loss over there, the other side's response, especially a response from someone like Gao Tianshi, would most likely give some clues. The problem was that Xia City's response had been normal from the beginning until now. Everyone was tearing at each other, shooting their mouths at each other, greeting each other's parents and relatives. They were also mindful of their bottom lines. They wouldn't truly provoke trouble on the level of extraordinaries. Everything was far too normal. In addition, Gong Qi's near-invincible extraordinariness had brought about far too much inertia. It was to the extent that Ree had gradually forgotten his original intentions. He had sunk deep into his favorite profession of shooting his mouth off and spitting his mouth until now. A person's thoughts were always strung together. The previously forgotten links were only temporarily buried by the dust and sand of emotions. Now Luo Nan had shaken the world with his heaven-bestowed talent and grandeur. He had taken out the picture of the golden copper headband and other stimulating information to show how extraordinary he was. He had contended with Ghost Eye in the Abyss region. He was calm and unruffled, skillful and at ease. These circumstances, which he had never thought of before, were strung together and suddenly raised the world. Of course, this included Ree's own assessment of Luo Nan's status and ability. Some plots that he would never have thought of before were picked up one after another by the thoughts that blew away the dust and sand. They were like an iron chain that coldly stretched across the front, reminding Ree of its existence. Motherf ****. Could it be that teacher really was tripped by a horse-tripping rope? Ree still didn't think of the worst-case scenario. After all, the data from the life support system wouldn't lie. But he couldn't help but shiver in his heart when he thought of Gong Qi gnashing his teeth in frustration and helplessness. Oh, he was thinking too much, right? What if he wasn't? Ree couldn't stay any longer. If it really was a horse-tripping rope situation, then Gong Qi's suffering a great loss was secondary. His closed-door training caused him to be cut off from information and then hit the wall again. The consequences were truly unbearable. Gong Qi couldn't bear it. He and his family couldn't bear it either. The more he thought about it, the more he felt uncomfortable. Ree subconsciously reached out his hand and touched the emergency communication device he carried with him. According to Gong Qi, if there really was an urgent matter, he could use this communication device to wake him up from his special state and get in touch with him. It wasn't that Ree had never done this before, but he couldn't find a reason to do so. Now that Jin Tong was killed, the cage theory was born, and even the Abyss district wasn't stable. All of this came from that damned Luo Nan. This should be an urgent matter. In the end, Ree stomped his feet and practically closed his eyes as he walked to the study. He didn't dare to look at the discussions online anymore. He turned off the live broadcast and rushed out of the room like he was fleeing. He went straight out the door, started the car, and drove towards the secret location of Gong Qi's closed-door training. Emergency communication could be done over a long distance, but some words and some things were better said face to face. This was a matter of attitude. It was 4 or 5 in the morning in Chan City right now. Due to the hurricane passing through, it was raining cats and dogs. It could be said that one couldn't even see their fingers in front of them. Ree wasn't in the mood to play the midnight car game. He went straight into autopilot mode. The headlights tore through the darkness on the road as he advanced at high speed along the magnetic track. But this way, the 10 or 20 minutes on the road would be very hard to endure. Did he want to listen to some boring news like Guala rapidly upgraded to a Category 3 hurricane? Suspected to be influenced by factors other than meteorological conditions? So even though Ree screamed madly in his heart, "I don't want to see it," his fingers still opened up the audio and video system honestly. He connected to the live broadcast platform and watched the latest news from the circular conference room in Xia City. Of course, the bullet screen and whatnot were all blocked. Then Re saw Luo Nan on the podium. His eyes were half closed, and his eyelids were slightly trembling. This scene wasn't much different from before. It was just that he was a bit more focused. But it was strange. The instant Re cast his gaze on the podium, Luo Nan also opened his eyes. His gaze was focused on the camera. It was more like he was aiming at Re's eyes. Re's heart thumped. An inexplicable cold current gushed out along with the blood pumped out from his heart. It soaked half of his chest in a cold and soaked sensation. There was also a prickling sensation of being ground by coarse sand. What's going on? Has his fear of Luo Nan reached this level? The car speeding through the wind and rain wasn't affected by Re's mood. It continued to drive strictly according to the established route. The AI butler followed its preset priorities and played the information that was currently most worthy of its owner's attention. It just so happened that it was news related to Hurricane Guala. The relevant situation was updated. Guala is predicted to make landfall on the west coast of Nadu Island in 20 minutes. The maximum wind speed at the center is currently 197 km per hour. The giant waves in the early stages are likely to bring along a Class C surge. A portion of the marine mutants will attack Nadu, Pala, Newark, and other coastal defensive lines. We can't rule out the possibility of a Class B or higher mutant appearing in the wind zone. Re fiercely knocked on the steering wheel. He was a bit irritated. His route just so happened to be within the range of influence of the surge tide. If his luck was bad, he would encounter a few mutants that came ashore. That would truly be disgusting. However, listening to the unfinished meaning of the news, it seemed that the upgrade of Hurricane Guala this time was caused by the influence of a powerful mutant within the wind zone. A powerful vicious beast that could temporarily affect extreme weather hadn't appeared in the surrounding seas for a long time. Chapter 577. The hurricane several thousand kilometers away continued to approach the archipelago region. Luo Nan's mind had already reached the shore a step earlier. It continued to expand forward with a steady momentum. But the current expansion already appeared to Luo Nan as a different kind of law. The root of this expansion was not at the forefront. Instead, it was at the core of this expanding force. In other words, Luo Nan himself. Luo Nan's figure congealed on the podium. But the structure of space and time around him was like a projection that was hard to distinguish between real and fake. Layers and layers appeared with Luo Nan at the center. This was the bubble that he had demonstrated to the participants before. It symbolized the cage of humanity. Looking at it from this angle, everyone in the circular conference room, everyone in the Shangding building, everyone in Xia City, and even everyone within the range of Luo Nan's senses were wrapped within a bubble. The only differences were in terms of stability and range of coverage. Of course, the shape of each bubble was different as well. The bubbles of the vast majority of people, or rather, the majority of people, could collapse and regenerate at any time. But for a short period of time, the bubbles would warp and transform into all sorts of complex shapes. The reason for this was the pressure of other bubbles and even deeper environmental conditions. Right now, Luo Nan's bubble was one of the greatest sources of pressure for the people present. This bubble was far too enormous compared to everyone else. The stability of the core region far exceeded that of everyone else. So much so that the 1,400 people in the conference room were all suppressed to varying degrees. And under the effect of the group consciousness that had already been finalized, certain aspects converged to form the force field of the ring of blood and will together. But this did not mean that Luo Nan's own bubble could do as it pleased. Not to mention the powerful pressure from the 5 extraordinaries around him, the seemingly ordinary things around him. The podium, the circular conference room, the Shangding building. Everything he sensed on the plane of reality was simply a part of an incomparably enormous bubble. That incomparably enormous bubble was the environment of this world. It was the embodiment of space-time power that leaned more towards the material plane. Luo Nan faintly sensed the indescribably complex curvature of this space-time. In other words, it was tantamount to feeling the tiny traces of the boundless universe added to this place. Such a realization was undoubtedly the manifestation of his observational ability advancing a step further. It was in this context that new discoveries inevitably arrived. Luo Nan noticed that there were a few areas worthy of special attention on the complex curved surface of spacetime. The magnitude of the impact was not something that could be caused by any small bubble. Furthermore, there was a relatively fleeting point behind a certain massively warped region. It was similar to the basketball team of extraordinaries that hovered in the night sky of Xia City. From behind the warped and deformed structure, it radiated powerful stimulative information that made him unhappy. It was almost certain that this was a transcendent. Luo Nan's soul cloak covered an enormous area of effect, but it wasn't strange at all. Because part of it was based on the condensation ring, according to the different activity levels of water molecules, the progress in the ocean was faster, and the progress in the inland was slower. However, it almost covered the entire East Asian continent and half of the Pacific Ocean. It was just that Luo Nan knew that he was unable to handle the enormous amount of information within. He didn't investigate, didn't notice, and didn't do anything. He just maintained a normal state of attention towards a few sensitive areas. In such a vast area, no matter how rare extraordinaries were, it was still possible to encounter a few. But the problem was that the distance of this stimulation point was too close. Luo Nan's first reaction was that it was within the range of Xia City, but that wasn't right. The fuzzy judgment of being very far yet very close was truly nauseating. Luo Nan had no choice but to split a portion of his mind to pay attention to this point. After a few consecutive rounds of stimulation, he filled in more and more sensory information in an attempt to restore the information. As the constructed information became more and more complete, there was a sudden jolt. All sorts of one-sided information instantly combined in front of the answer that already existed, returning to their respective positions. In the end, what was restored in the domain of perception was the astral winds and clouds that spanned thousands of kilometers, as well as the blood-colored ape that flew back and forth. The cloud world. So naturally, the target that gave him negative stimulation also appeared, Gong Qi. This Deputy Secretary General of the Society, who had fallen into the clouds, was undoubtedly a psychic extraordinaire. He was a powerful person that stood at the apex of the inner world. Gong Qi floated within the astral winds of the clouds. His expression was grave and stern. It looked like he had yet to find a way to break through this cloud labyrinth. On the other hand, Luo Nan had already extended his consciousness to his headquarters. If Luo Nan were to use physical distance to discuss the situation, then Luo Nan's current situation was already difficult for Gong Qi to reach. Well, this was just a joke at the moment. But Luo Nan still remembered that Her Majesty Empress Wu had a request. She wanted him to achieve what was known as the enemy of 10,000. Luo Nan wanted to completely incorporate the situation he faced into the framework of formatting theory. He wanted to consider all sorts of factors and calculate all sorts of conditions. It was as if he was conducting a large-scale battle to solve a large problem. Now it was like this. It seemed that he already had an opportunity to include Gong Qi. Luo Nan wasn't prepared to act blindly without thinking before he could completely figure out the train of thought of this strategic plan. But there was an observation result before his eyes. It was impossible to ignore it no matter what. Luo Nan was certain that there was a similar type of bubble on the most complex and obvious curved surface of spacetime that he could observe. The bubble seemed to be a bit smaller, but it collided with the bubble, crisscrossing and deforming. It formed an indescribable shape, but it was hard to separate it as a whole. Similar collisions seemed to be occurring in various directions. But the main problem was that Luo Nan's consciousness followed the soul cloak and extended outwards. It followed the inconceivably warped surface. It seemed as though it was effortless for Luo Nan to move from one spacetime bubble to another spacetime bubble. The other spacetime was none other than the cloud world. Luo Nan's consciousness didn't go through the void corridor structure designed by his mother. He actually leaped over the barrier of spacetime and entered that marvelous world. Luo Nan was a bit stupefied. He couldn't help but consider. Was the warped scene he saw before him real? Was it normal and stable? What sort of meaning did it represent? There was some logic that could be deduced behind the newest observation result. It couldn't be ignored. It could be seen that on one hand, the atmospheric bubble contained the small bubbles. It delineated the rules and laws of existence, forming a livable environment. But on the other hand, the atmospheric bubble suppressed the small bubbles. The small bubbles also affected the atmospheric bubble. The small bubbles also pushed and warped against each other. From beginning to end, a kind of repulsive force was manifested. This was the relationship between the I and the not me that Luo Nan spoke of earlier. And this relationship could still be established by expanding outwards from a sociological perspective. It was like anchored a new argument for his grandfather's theory of the triple format of self, society, and heaven and earth. Luo Nan had yet to completely straighten out the logical relationship within, but he received this new level of information. The depth of his understanding of the range covered by the soul cloak increased by a large margin. Correspondingly, the amount of information contained instantly increased by several times. No, at the very least by several tens or even hundreds of times. Luo Nan lacked an accurate estimate of this. He still followed the established model and perceptual precision to analyze the situation of the relevant region, especially the problems related to the cloud world and the palace enlightenment. And the enormous flow of information squeezed in the next instant. It nearly stuffed his brain to the point of bursting. It was as if a nuclear bomb had exploded in Luo Nan's brain. The physiological fusing mechanism was forcefully activated. For 2 seconds, his mind was practically blank. His reaction to the outside world had already come to a complete standstill. It must be known that aside from clairvoyance around the Chan City archipelago, he was also fighting against Ghost Eye in the Abyss region. The pressure was already quite great. If not for the fact that the force field of the Ring of Bloodwill had stabilized, and the few consciousnesses within the force field had been stimulated to enter a semi-awakened state, it would have been equivalent to having a few more maintenance personnel. Otherwise, the space bastion might have exploded on the spot. No matter how big Luo Nan's heart was, he was shocked into a cold sweat upon encountering this sort of situation. Ghost Eye was quite astute. He sensed a large fluctuation in the defenses of the blood intent ring and immediately pulled back. He took advantage of the situation to end this confrontation, which no longer had any significance of verification. 500 kilometers away, Ghost Eye let out a breath of relief. The twisted handprints of his hands dispersed, and the sinister force field that nearly caused all the passengers on the luxurious cruise ship to collapse slowly disappeared. At this time, if the beautiful host, Dan E., could ask, "Mr. Ghost Eye, how did your bet go?" then the program would be considered complete. But the problem was that Dan E. was able to sit steadily in her chair. Her body and consciousness were completely stiff. Though it wasn't as exaggerated as a certain person's claim that she was scared to the point of pissing herself, it was really difficult for her to continue hosting the program. Therefore, the audience of the inner world could only stare blankly as Ghost Eye slowly withdrew his power. He muttered to himself and put on a face that was neither happy nor angry to entice the imagination of everyone. Ree, who was currently cruising in the wind and rain, couldn't help but fantasize about whether or not Ghost Eye had given Luo Nan a sneak attack and left a fatal hidden wound or something. There seemed to be some problems with Luo Nan's state in the last few seconds. The red and white color of the blood on his face was extremely obvious. Before Ree could finish her thoughts, the car had already taken a detour from the coastal highway and entered a short-distance undersea tunnel that required an extremely high level of authority. This tunnel had undergone a special design. It used expensive special glass as its main body, achieving the effects of a single mirror and limited invisibility. Looking out from the inside of the tunnel, one could directly see the gloomy undersea world around the island. Looking in from the outside, one could only see a turbid turbulence. There were no traces of artificial construction. After passing through this tunnel, one would arrive at a group of small uninhabited islands and reefs that headquarters had specially opened up for closed-door cultivation. This was the legacy left behind by the eruption of a local volcano during the Third World War. Though the geological environment wasn't stable, it was extremely suitable for ability users of higher realms to cultivate and comprehend. It was said that it would yield twice the result with half the effort. Chapter 578. Even if REE was a grade B powerhouse, she still felt awkward and depressed that she was asking for trouble in such a hurricane, especially during the tide rush period. For a second or two, he almost wanted to turn around and go back. But when she saw Luo Nan's clearly childish face within the video system, Luo Nan's face was calm and unperturbed. The blood pumped out of his heart was mixed with stimulating toxins. She no longer considered the possibility of giving up halfway. RE slapped the steering wheel heavily and got off the car. He registered with the security personnel in this area and asked for a raincoat that was better than nothing. Then he was about to rush into the curtain of rain. But the security captain called out to him at this time. This experienced B-rank person said very seriously, "Old right now Volcano Island has a guest staying for cultivation. Don't misunderstand if you encounter him." REE did not find it strange that a guest was stationed here. Since the cultivation effects of this small island were extremely good, many ability users were willing to pay a high price to rent the seclusion rooms of the upper echelons of the society to conduct critical cultivation. The society had specially arranged for a few similar areas to be rented out. Not only could they amass wealth, but they could also exchange resources with other people or powers. He went, "Oh." Then he asked in passing, "Which side is it?" "A certain upper echelon of the Order of Justice." "I'm not too sure about the specifics." "The Order of Justice?" REE was startled. He thought to himself that this was the biggest joke in the world. Who didn't know that the Order of Justice's scales of truth was a first-rate treasure that aided in cultivation? Why would they need to ask the society for help if they had this sort of supreme-grade sacrificial artifact that could suppress the destiny of the order? Could it be that they were secretly involved in some shady business? REE's mind spun a few times, but he could not figure it out. He just responded, put on the raincoat, and walked outside. He passed by his own flying car and subconsciously glanced inside. He saw the video system that had just been turned off not too long ago. A flash of inspiration suddenly flashed through his mind. At the same time, Luo Nan's excessively young face flashed through his mind. A thought suddenly turned through his mind. Speaking of which, wasn't it because of the Order of Justice that headquarters became enemies with the Xia City branch and provoked Luo Nan? He had once heard Gong Chi talk about the deeper reason behind this. Wonderful. RE only hesitated beside the car for 2 seconds before she tore off her raincoat and got back into the car. She clenched her teeth and entered the live stream platform again. She then turned on the cooperative live stream mode and bullet comments. Due to his arrival, the live stream inevitably received a huge amount of mockery. REE turned a blind eye to it, or perhaps he had fully absorbed the deep malice and triggered the same emotions in his heart. He faced the 30,000 viewers, twitched his lips, and sneered, "Congratulations to everyone for witnessing a miracle." A 16-year-old kid who entered the inner world for less than 3 months had an extremely exciting and prolonged confrontation with a veteran extraordinary who has been at the peak for 30 years. Before he could finish, the bullet screen in the live streaming channel and the comments on the forum exploded. Oh, I love conspiracy theories. SB. I told you, this is purely a manga setting, okay? Moreover, it's facing the risk of being cut in half at the waist and having a bad ending. Goddess RE, I don't understand what you're saying. Can you please be more suicidal? Tiger touching RE God, I'm going to eat some broken limbs and minced meat. Could it be that the Emperor's new clothes have been torn? Ghost Eye, what do you think? Luo Nan, He Yuayin, what about you guys? There were all sorts of comments. Although their stances were different, the confusion and doubt between the lines couldn't be hidden. Even though there had already been over an hour of foreshadowing and the subversive impact of the cage theory, a few minutes of a newbie and an experienced and powerful extraordinary fighting on equal footing still exceeded the limits of the majority of people's imaginations. The more experienced they were, the more inconceivable they felt. This was the first time REE's words had touched the hearts of the majority of people ever since she became a guest on the live stream. She had touched the extremely sensitive chord in people's hearts. REE paid no attention to the layer upon layer of bullet screens. She just twisted the corner of her lips and continued to sneer. I'm not doubting Senior Ghost Eye's verification process. No matter how much Senior Ghost Eye doesn't bother with trifles, he still possesses the style that an extraordinary should have. It's impossible for him to put effort into a lie that can be easily seen through. I believe in his professional integrity and his ability to make wise and far-sighted choices. With a plan in mind, REE easily made the majority of the audience dizzy. He looked at the questioning and cursing bullet screens in the projection area and shrugged calmly. Yes. I believe that there are no problems with the confrontation between Senior Ghost Eye and Luo Nan. I can even say that there are no problems with the strength that Luo Nan himself has displayed. He is worthy of being called the humanoid infrasonic array. He really does stand on a level that we cannot imagine. If I were to participate in this gamble, I would have already lost my pants by now. The surrounding 30,000 viewers online were truly stupefied. Some people even wanted to pull open the projection to see if there was a gun pointed at the back of REE's head. REE could show the back of his head to this group of scum, but he was more than happy to show his clear stance and his undisguised malice. Right now, Luo Nan was still standing on the podium in the circular conference room within the live stream. It was said that he was adjusting the structure of the blood intent ring to wake up those hypnotized idiots one after another. On the other hand, Yuan's cold and clear gaze pierced through the camera lens. It was biting, cold and piercing. Oh, this was the daughter of the He family, one of the most outstanding achievements of the Star Alliance Committee's Team AB. If she was standing in front of him, REE really would have to behave himself. But they were separated by 7,000 kilometers. What was there to be afraid of? Therefore, REE didn't stumble at all. He spoke eloquently. What I'm most curious about right now is how Luo Nan's strength and potential were accumulated and realized. How was he able to jump to this level in a short period of 70 to 80 days? This doesn't belong to the category of normal. Look, this is an abnormal situation. This is where the problem arises. At this time, it would be perfect if there was someone who could cooperate and act as a supporting character or something. Unfortunately, RE wanted to continue singing this one-man show. Is Luo Nan a genius? I don't know. But from the information he registered with the headquarters, he wasn't one 2 months ago. He followed his family's so-called formatting theory and painstakingly accumulated for 5 years. He still hasn't touched the ceiling of awakening. He only became a psychic who was better than nothing. He relied on the garrulous psychic diagram and the outbreak of the calamity of the human-faced arachnid to enter the society's line of sight. Is this kind of person a genius? REE had completely entered the mode of shooting his mouth off. This was his invincible state on the internet in recent years. I've even seen people say that Luo Nan has potential and accumulation. He just hasn't been enlightened yet. He entered the society and received proper cultivation guidance. Then he'll understand everything. I don't know if there's such a situation. I just saw him energetically advocating for formatting theory on the stage. He never mentioned a single word about the guidance of a senior or a friend. Of course, these words were a bit inaccurate. At the very least, Luo Nan had mentioned the guidance of Her Majesty Empress Wu. He had also talked about the condensation ring in class. But right now, what was important was momentum. He didn't care about the details. RE spread his hands and made a helpless gesture. There's nothing I can do if you guys think so. But if everyone still has a bit of critical spirit and the ability to think independently, then there's no harm in carefully considering this. Luo Nan, this mediocre genius, has miraculously risen for over 2 months. Aside from his dazzling deeds, what else has happened in Xia City? Aside from the calamity of the human-faced arachnid that I've talked about before. Oh, this is Quantum Corporation's fault. But could it be that everyone hasn't heard that this company has gone berserk and conducted experiments in Xia City? They've encircled their territory in order to excavate some hidden treasure in Xia City? RE laughed very happily in the face of the rapidly boiling atmosphere in the live broadcast room. Also, the conflict between the Order of Justice and the Xia City branch has mustered a large force, and Wang and the majority of the branch have been destroyed. Why? Could it be because of a hedonistic follower? A child? There's no need to hide the conflict between headquarters and the Xia City branch, including the 2000th young Miss incident. Why has Luo Nan always become the focus of everyone? Could it be that he's a natural-born troublemaker and troublemaker? After considering all the subjective factors, shouldn't we also consider the more objective facts? When all the problems point towards a single focal point, we don't need to ponder over what he did. Instead, we need to ponder over where he is in reality, what kind of space and resources he occupies. You're perfectly fine blocking the middle of the road. If you don't get hit, who will? Don't you think so? After leaving behind a string of questions, RE simply cut off the live broadcast signal with a sneer. He opened the door and got out of the car. He no longer cared about the follow-up reactions. He knew that because of his overly straightforward hints, at this moment, at least half of the audience would curse him for having sinister intentions, shameless and despicable intentions. His personal reputation would most likely be ruined, and there might even be some trouble at the headquarters. But so what? After several minutes of confrontation between Luo Nan and Ghost Eye, he had already become a joke. There was nothing to feel distressed about. Plus, if Luo Nan was allowed to develop smoothly, given the conflict between Luo Nan and his teacher, and with himself, there would be conflict sooner or later. And it would certainly be to the point where one side would die. With Luo Nan's terrifying rate of progress, if he didn't take advantage of the opportunity to make a move now, would he wait until Luo Nan calmly amassed his troops and swept his path before regretting it? Truthfully speaking, even RE was a bit convinced by the end of his explanation. It seemed that there really was a high possibility of following this train of thought. It would really be funny if he hit the mark by a fluke. RE picked up the raincoat and put it on. He looked up at the sky. The rainwater poured on his face, bringing with it the cool and fishy smell of the ocean. It seemed to be the smell of Luo Nan's blood. He yelled, "Awesome!" He didn't care about the security captain's hesitant expression as he clenched his teeth and charged into the wind and rain. There was still a straight line of 40 kilometers to the location of Gong Chi's closed-door training. Even though RE was a B-rank power, he would still need to spend 20 minutes on the road in this kind of damned weather. It didn't matter to RE anymore. He faced the wind and rain, swiftly walking through the rugged environment created by the islands, reefs, and the curtain of rain. When he encountered the boundless sea surface where the seawater rose, he used his telekinesis to interfere and solidify it. He treaded on the water and was truly delighted. Before this, he had hoped that the security personnel of these islands and reefs would be strong enough to minimize the effects of tide rush. But right now, he really wished for two blind mutants to jump out and serve as Lord Ho's practice. Unfortunately, the road to Gong Chi's closed-door training was peaceful and quiet. Rumble. Chapter 579. REE was startled and raised his head to take a look. However, there was nothing unusual in the vast water curtain. However, before he could turn his head around, another muffled clap of thunder rang out beside him. There was also turbulent and surging clouds that seemed to have sprayed out from the boundless curtain of rain, bringing along fine ice particles that were like the wind high up in the sky. They hit the back of his neck with a dense chill. Mutant. REE's first reaction was absolutely excellent. Although he was a spiritual type ability user, the psychic shield and confusion barrier he set up instantly formed a circle of hardness and toughness, as well as a shield that had the effect of interfering with bewitchment. The moment the cold air seeped in, his body had already split into 6 illusory shadows, shuttling in all directions. Unless it was a killing move at the level of a transcendent, it would be impossible to finish him off in one hit. However, the problem was that there was nothing else after the cold air, ice particles, and vast clouds. REE had been semi-invisible for almost a minute, and his soul power had been consumed a lot, but he did not find anything else. Around him, clouds and rain intertwined, blocking most of his vision. He could only see waves of turbulent clouds rushing past. Some brushed past him, and some did not feel anything at all. Using his spiritual sense to judge, he was even more confused. He only felt that the inside was illusory, and there was no fixed number. Moreover, through the clouds, the entire space seemed to be suddenly elongated and enlarged, and even shifted to a height of 10,000 meters. There was a blood-red light even further away. What the hell? Ree's finger was already pressing the communication and alarm function of the bracelet. Currently, he was under the surveillance of the security team at all times, and he could ask for help at any time if he encountered any danger. As for the so-called practice, how could he take it seriously when he was just imagining things? The security team also responded instantly, and it was the captain of the security team who personally spoke. "Old he, what's the situation? The environment here has changed." Ree was halfway through his words when a blurry shadow flashed in front of him. He could not see it clearly, but he felt that it was extremely familiar. He subconsciously straightened his body and looked up, and saw the depths of the clouds again, the figure that seemed to be suspended in the air. This time, he could not straighten his tongue. "Old he? Old he?" As the captain of the security team called out, Ree muttered, "Teacher?" As soon as his voice fell, the shadow over there disappeared in the rolling clouds. "Secretary General Gong has come out of seclusion." The security captain was a little confused, but Ree couldn't care less. She leaped up and rushed toward the blurry figure. He ran forward a few steps, but suddenly became alert. This was not Gong Chi's style. Furthermore, this series of cloud images was too different from the natural environment of the island chain. Could it be a mirage? Or was it some kind of malicious illusion? After a moment of hesitation, the surging clouds in the rain suddenly faded away, just like how they came. The strange scene of the sky being distorted and expanded 10,000 meters high also disappeared. Everything returned to normal. At this time, the security chief also sent a message. "The surveillance is in place. Your side is fine for now," Ree replied in annoyance. "What about before? It's harder to get the surveillance equipment on a rainy day. I only saw a wave of fog. It's also shown on the device. Does that mean it's not an illusion?" An illusion? The security chief didn't quite understand, but he also had a request for Ree. "Old he will be there soon. It's convenient for you now. Help take a look at the situation first. We'll definitely have to write a report later. None of us can escape." Ree cursed in her heart and hesitated for a few seconds. She really couldn't stand the security chief's words anymore. Finally, she reluctantly leaned forward and deliberately walked slower. Unfortunately, no matter how slow he walked, it was impossible for him to wait for the security team to arrive. Moreover, in the situation just now, all the sense of distance became very blurry. He walked 7 or 8 steps forward, and suddenly his feet stopped. Ree's skin was a little cold and astringent, and her consciousness was a little sluggish. That was the feeling of an illusory and extremely cold psychic power left in the air. That's right, this was indeed Gong Chi's aura. He subconsciously tensed up and called out in a low voice, "Teacher?" There was only the sound of the falling rain and the rustling of the volcanic rocks. Other than that, there was nothing else. Ree looked around blankly. Reason told him that the scene just now was indeed an illusion. Otherwise, many of the phenomena could not be explained. However, the psychic imprint left in the surroundings was the most conclusive evidence. The conflict between the two sides directly stirred up his brain into paste. While he was still in a daze, he suddenly heard a very low sigh. A new plane. Who was it? Ree shuddered violently and almost jumped out of the shield again. However, for some reason, at the same time that the sigh sounded, all the strength in his body silently dissipated. His entire body froze there, and he couldn't even move a toe. At this moment, Ree was so scared that he was about to pee. How could he not know that he must have bumped into the hands of some extraordinary? But who was it that could enter such an important place like the headquarters, eh? Ree blinked and saw a blurry shadow behind the rain. It was different from the illusion just now. Although he couldn't see the figure's face clearly, he knew that it was a real person. And from the voice, he could hear that it was an adult woman. The person who came had no intention of taking a picture with him. She only whispered there, "This person has a bit of crooked luck." "Are you talking about me? Talking to me?" Ree wanted to move his mouth, but found that even his ability to speak had been taken away. And the woman said again, "He was just spouting nonsense on the live broadcast, using my church as an example. Now that there are signs here in your headquarters, I wonder how you will stop the mouths of the people in the world." Sure enough. Ree's face first flushed red, and then a little green. The person who came was really a high-ranking member of the Order of Justice. This was awkward. However, the woman was obviously not talking to him. There were other people present. Before he could finish his thoughts, the long feminine voice of the headquarters president, Abner, flowed out from the curtain of rain. "The discovery of any plane should be the commonwealth of mankind. This is a good thing worthy of celebration. What is there to block? Since the Lord Officiator happened to be here, we might as well seriously discuss the follow-up confirmation and exploration matters." Abner spoke softly and paid attention to the ups and downs of his syllables, as if he was telling a child a fairy tale. However, Ree, who knew his temperament well, subconsciously shuddered. This president was supposed to be in a meeting in Sandalwood City, but it was more likely that his main body was still in Sandalwood City. It was just that his mind wandered over here after receiving the news. Of course, President Abner could come to this small island if he wanted to. This was a matter of course. What really made Ree's brain stupefied was the person President Abner had addressed, officiator. The Order of Justice's officiator? Ree froze in the curtain of rain. His entire body was soaked, but he didn't dare to move a muscle. There was a moment when he had the urge to tear off his own death-seeking mouth. Luo Nan, in the circular conference room 7,000 kilometers away, also wanted to tear off his own death-seeking tool. He didn't even have the time to rejoice that he had crossed the crater of abnormal states before he was forced into a corner by the meticulous mental senses of the two apex extraordinaries. Fortunately, the two extraordinaries were courteous to each other. Perhaps they were afraid of each other, so they wouldn't rashly touch each other's cage. Yes, it was more appropriate to use the term domain to describe it. The two's detection senses divided their territories, and they crossed each other. It was hard to avoid some areas where they didn't have a tacit understanding, so they left some gaps. Luo Nan was extremely decisive. He gave up all interference actions in that area in the first instant and entered pure observation mode. His consciousness jumped directly to the polar domain, and he didn't dare to play any more scouting or eavesdropping. He retreated all the way to the Xia City area. After confirming his safety, he couldn't help but laugh involuntarily. He laughed at his death-seeking behavior just now, and he also laughed at the big mistake the two extraordinaries had made. Plane. Was this the name given to the space-time bubble? It was quite magical, but it was completely wrong. Admittedly, the cloud world existed as a plane, but it couldn't be linked to the Sandalwood Island chain. Those abnormalities were nothing more than Luo Nan correcting the precision of his coordinate system and its mode of action. He made a big no, he made an experiment. Right now, Luo Nan was on the podium, broadcasting live under the gazes of tens of thousands of people. And he used the excuse of adjusting the blood wool bracelet to openly stare blankly. This sudden laugh made many people stupefied. He Yuan was currently in contact with several higher-ups of the branch due to Ree's shameless remarks. They were discussing countermeasures. The contrast was too great when she saw Luo Nan's relaxed appearance. She subconsciously asked, "What's wrong?" "It's nothing. There's a problem with the coordinate system." "Oh." Luo Nan came to his senses. He laughed and didn't speak anymore. But on the plane of his consciousness, there was a point of origin. There were 3 vertical and horizontal lines pointing to various directions and dimensions, delineating the scale of deep space, the Earth, and even the other space-time bubbles. Perhaps this sort of marking was meaningless to an objective world. But to Luo Nan himself, it was a type of high integration. It was similar to the clairvoyance mode of the life sketches from before. This sort of mode filtered and integrated a huge amount of information, forming a corresponding judgment that was only effective to him. Whether it was the large bubble, the small bubble, the large world, or the small cage, they were all similar and equivalent in his thinking mode. He could use the same observation standard to link them all together. Luo Nan was fully deserving of being an expert in doing this sort of thing. This was especially true of the mysterious I symbol and the classical Cartesian coordinate system that was formed from it. It was simply the best framework that was specially created for this purpose. The nearby Hiyuayin, the Order of Justice's first oblatum 7,000 kilometers away, and Gong Qi from another plane could all be identified and judged using the same standard. As long as Luo Nan's domain was able to effectively interfere with the area involved, he would be able to map his own rules into that spacetime. It was just that this way, when the observation target acted on two spacetime bubbles at the same time. There was no doubt that this was referring to Gong Qi. He would also stack the contents of the two different spacetime bubbles together. It was just like Re's hallucination. Luo Nan liked this result very much. And at the same time, he knew that this could become, and he would do his best to make it into, a nightmare for many people. Right now, there was no harm in starting from Chan City. His gaze turned to the live broadcast camera. In that position, Zhang Ji was about to wake up. And Long 7 had already opened his eyes a step earlier than her. His sharp gaze shot over. And it was from Long 7 that the nearly 1,500 participants in the round conference room woke up one after another. Quite a few of them felt as if they had just experienced an unrealistic dream. But at the same time, there were quite a few people who absorbed nourishment from this unrealistic dream. They reorganized the operation of their own abilities. As more and more people woke up, the conference room gradually became chaotic. Luo Nan was certain that he wouldn't let the class continue. He took advantage of the fact that most people still hadn't completely regained their senses to declare. Chapter 580. Congratulations, King of Luck, Mr. 1 in 1,000. Don't joke about this. It's not that rare anymore, okay? It can't be helped. As long as we meet in Xia City, we're doomed to not be able to escape. So what if it's always luck? Ah, this is crazy. Don't they think that just because I'm in Xia City, I'm definitely a member of the Xia City branch? It's probably because you look like a bro, Bamboo Pole laughed out loud. His reaction was a bit conspicuous in this high-class restaurant, but he didn't care about the gazes cast at him. He just raised his glass to the middle-aged, slightly plump, yet still handsome, short-haired woman across from him. The latter also raised her glass and clinked it with bamboo poles. She sighed once more, what an enviable luck. Especially when it's destined to fall on your head. Bamboo Pole raised his eyebrows. What do you mean? Isn't your relationship with that person destined to be the first to enjoy the moonlight? That's true, but can you please sit up straight first? Sun Jiai didn't just say that before. She also used body language to express it. She smiled as she straightened her body. Under the light, the soul-stirring lines of her cleavage finally became a bit more normal. But she also mercilessly ridiculed her old friend. B rank is for showing off, not for acting. I'm not acting. It's just that the older I get, the pickier I get. Sun Jiai raised her glass again before it even touched the ground. She wanted to pour it on Bamboo Pole's face, but Bamboo Pole immediately begged for mercy. The two had been friends for several decades. They were infinitely close to being friends with benefits, but they were far more than friends with benefits. Their feelings were subtle and smooth. They didn't treat each other as outsiders when they spoke. Sun Jiai didn't hide her goal at all at this time. She took the initiative to clinch her glass with Bamboo Poles and said, "Now is the time for you to play your role." My role? Intelligence? Your value lies in your relationship with Teacher Luo. Hey. This isn't slander. This is the truth. You are the first patient out of the 1447 people in the meeting to jump from C rank to B rank by some dog's hit luck. Why is it you and not someone else? Do you dare to deny that this has nothing to do with your friendship with that Teacher Luo? And then? Of course it's because of the Ring of Blood will. There's nothing wrong with the blood will hoop, but it requires a number of people, a circle, and experience. Adding all of these factors together, only Mr. Luo can satisfy them. That's true. Bamboo Pole had more or less understood, but Sun Jiayi still wanted to make things clear. So I hope. Oh, to be more precise, Starry Sky Society hopes that Mr. Luo can come to our society and give another public lecture. The content can be the same as the one on the night of the 14th. Mr. Luo can do whatever he wants. All the preparations and expenses, including remuneration, we will definitely satisfy Mr. Luo. Of course, that includes you as a middleman. Bamboo Pole raised his eyebrows and laughed. Starry Sky Club? Bro, what are you doing? Sun Jiayi shrugged. An academic conference and a business cooperation. The LCRF is cooperating with the branch? LCRF has never been the only shareholder of the Starry Sky Club. We just provide a place for everyone to communicate and occasionally do the most meaningful theme. Mr. Luo's ring of blood will possesses such value. Bamboo Pole smiled, but did not immediately respond. Sun Jiayi saw Bamboo Pole's reaction and knew that it would be difficult to persuade him this time. She also knew that although Bamboo Pole seemed to be joking, he was actually very determined. It would be very difficult to open an opening for him, so she settled for the next best thing. How about being a messenger? I'll pay you according to the middleman's price. After all, you still don't know Mr. Luo's own intentions. You have to say that to Secretary He. Besides, with your ability, are you afraid that you can't find a messenger? That's why I came to you. That's not because of your ability. Before he finished speaking, Bamboo Pole's increasingly sensitive senses noticed that a few tables away, a person was cautiously approaching and even making eye contact with Sun Jiayi. Sun Jiayi's genial expression probably made the person misunderstand something. The person straightened his clothes and hurried over. His heart was beating fast and he was a little nervous. However, his voice was still very clear and pleasant. Sister Jiayi, what a coincidence. Sun Jiayi raised her eyelids and her smile faded a little. This is my territory. Are you surprised to see me? I'm the one who can't wait for more coincidences like this. Didn't I come here immediately? The person who came was a young man with handsome features. He was dressed in a decent casual suit, and the way he dressed his hands and feet were quite tasteful. What was more rare was that he knew how to speak. He held a bottle of expensive red wine in both hands and stood there in a very stylish manner. He was a celebrity that left a deep impression on people. In fact, he was indeed a celebrity. Bamboo Pole, who usually paid attention to beautiful celebrities and entertainment gossip, quickly recognized that this person was called Lan Lin. He was a popular idol in the past 2 years, and he seemed to have a good image. Lan Lin smiled and took 2 more steps forward. She nodded politely at Bamboo Pole, and then her eyes flew to Sun Jiayi's face. She bent down and moved her face closer to Sun Jiayi. She lowered her voice and said, Sister Jiayi, are you free tonight? Without waiting for him to finish, Sun Jiayi's faded smile bloomed again. The next moment, she reached out and pinched Lan Lin's chin. After all, they were in front of people. Lan Lin's expression slightly stiffened. He instinctively wanted to turn his head. He wanted to avoid it, but he also wanted to see what his target was. He quickly suppressed his impulse and let Sun Jiayi do it. Sun Jiayi's grip wasn't too strong, but it wasn't too weak either. She pulled off half an inch from Lan Lin's neck, as if she were treating an Alaskan Malamute. Lan Lin even narrowed his eyes and snorted. Sister Jiayi, it was an amazing reaction, so Sun Jiayi smiled quite happily. Unfortunately, in front of an ability user, the conflict in this reaction could not be hidden at all. Bamboo Pole didn't even blink. He didn't think it was strange. He already knew that this friend of his was a lustful person who liked to seek all kinds of stimulation. As a senior manager of the Starry Sky Club in Xia City, he was fully deserving of his position of power in Xia City. Finding a few celebrity dogs to have fun with was nothing. Of course, understanding was one thing, and approval was another. In the past, because of her temperament and beauty, Bamboo Pole had wanted to pursue her. Later, after seeing her true colors, he could only be friends. Sun Jai openly flirted with her dog. Bamboo Pole minded his own business and tasted his wine. But at this time, he noticed that a gaze was cast over from where Lan Lin had come from. The gaze was filled with surprise and anger. Bamboo Pole could sense it. Sun Jai was no exception. But she didn't care about that side. After testing the feel of his chin, she patted Lan Lin's left cheek. She used quite a bit of strength. Pia. The left side of Lan Lin's face turned red. Sun Jai's tone was quite intimate. Unaccountably solicitous. It's for that event, right? Lan Lin's smile became even more brilliant. He focused his gaze on Sun Jai, trying to show the moist and adorable feeling of a dog's eyes. If it were any other time, perhaps Sun Jai would chat a bit more with him. But right now, there were more important things to do. She didn't want to waste time. You can't even complete the most basic task. Don't even think about being a guest. Just do your best service. Go. Don't let your imagination run wild. Lan Lin was a little anxious. But then he saw Sun Jai's sharp and cold eyes. He subconsciously shivered. He didn't dare to say a word. He bowed and retreated. And now, Bamboo Pole was in a watching mode. He watched Lan Lin leave in a daze. Soon, he got into a quarrel with a beautiful girl who came with him. That beautiful girl was probably broken by Lan Lin's dog mode. She was so angry that she cried and left the table. Oh, that beautiful girl seemed to be an artist too. What was her name again? Is it interesting? Sun Jai raised her glass. She was about to get down to business with Bamboo Pole. But seeing Bamboo Pole's interested look, she smiled and snapped her fingers at Lan Lin, who was wearing sunglasses and a mask to avoid the strange gazes of other people in the restaurant. Lan Lin didn't care about anything else. He quickly walked over. Sister Jai? Sun Jai smiled at him. What's your girlfriend's name? She's not. Lan Lin wanted to deny it. But when he met Sun Jai's eyes, he could only answer honestly. She's Clara. She's a member of BHD. We're in the same company. She's a good girl. I feel sorry for her. Chase her down and have a drink together. Don't make it too ugly. Lan Lin was a little confused. He couldn't guess what Sun Jai was thinking. But suddenly, there was a turning point. No matter what, he had to seize it. He immediately responded and rushed over. Bamboo Pole curled his lips. You think you're an omnivore? Don't be ungrateful. I prepared it for you. Don't. I don't play this game. You think it's too light? We can go together. Get lost. Now Bamboo Pole wanted to pour wine in Sun Jai's face. Sun Jai didn't think much of it. She held the cup and lightly touched her chin. She smiled at him and said, You've reached a certain level of acting now. But since we're friends, can you tell me what kind of person Mr. Luo is? What do you want? We're in the service industry. We need to do some research. Get lost. Bamboo Pole made his attitude firm again. He didn't want to talk about this topic anymore. He turned his head to watch the real-life idol drama. At this time, Lan Lin had already caught up with Clara when she rushed out of the restaurant. He reached out to grab her arm. But in the next second, Clara, whose face had turned pale, was protected in someone's arms. Lan Lin, on the other hand, was kicked into the restaurant's glass door. Bamboo Pole saw who it was. Ouch! He looked at Sun Jai. Chapter 581. Luo Nan, who was outside the restaurant, was a bit baffled. Out of the blue, a beautiful girl with a pale face bumped into his embrace. Then a fully armed fellow with sunglasses and a mask caught up from behind. He didn't care about the group of people and extended his hand to pull. Then the hedonistic young master He Donglu, who was treating tonight, sent a flying kick. He sent the sunglasses masked man flying into the glass door. The sunglasses were slanted, revealing a large portion of his handsome and twisted face. He had a bit of an impression. With great difficulty, Luo Nan was able to match the handsome faces and identities of the man and woman. Huh, Clara? They were all from the same company as his sister. Clara in his embrace was a member of the BHD group. Though it was an 18th tier group, she was extremely good-looking. Another member of the group, Baiyu, had contacted him twice recently. They had arranged to have a meal together. Their relationship could be considered decent from Luo Nan's perspective. As for the sunglasses masked man, he had an impression of him, Lan Lin, the so-called high-quality idol. But he still hadn't been captured. He was one of the female celebrity Ji Qiong's friends with benefits. It was reasonable to say that he was a high-risk person for the mutant infection. What the hell was the branch doing? Oh my. We're kindred spirits. Perhaps it was Luo Nan's misperception, but He Donglu's tone was a bit odd. However, this also proved that He Donglu finally recognized who this person was. The smile on his face changed a bit. He walked over with his hands clasped behind his back. He didn't wait for Lan Lin to crawl up and stomped him to the ground. I never thought that you would have a bit of dog's hit luck, kid. He Donglu had stomped Lan Lin in order to express his attitude in front of Luo Nan. But now it was inevitably mixed with personal resentment. He twisted his neck, feeling unwell from head to toe. He originally wanted to have a one-night stand with that female artist called Ji Qiong, but he never thought that she was actually a carrier of the mutant infection virus. He was tossed and turned by the military medical organization several times in the following week. It was with great difficulty that he was able to pass the test. Now it seemed that the kid, Lan Lin, had escaped a calamity. This made him feel quite unhappy. He Donglu felt that it was natural for his family to stomp on others, but he was a bit too arrogant. Lan Lin was an idol that millions and millions of boys and girls chased after him. How could he endure such extraordinary humiliation? As an idol, Lan Lin's physical qualities were decent. He immediately arched his back and straightened his body, causing He Donglu to stagger. Then he held the glass door and struggled to get up, shouting, "Security, security." Lan Lin's personal assistant, follower, and bodyguard discovered the problem at this time. They made a big fuss as they rushed over. Luo Nan and He Donglu had no lack of bodyguards by their side. As for the restaurant's security guards, it was impossible for them to ignore this situation. They immediately sent more people to control the situation. A group of people crowded the entrance of the restaurant. Luo Nan was very vexed by this sort of scene. If tonight's banquet didn't involve an important matter, he simply wanted to turn around and leave. Luo Nan let out another sigh. He lowered his head to look at the beautiful girl in his embrace, who was in a dazed state. "Hey, Clara. Are you all right?" The second greeting finally brought Clara back to her senses from her absent-minded state. She quickly recognized Luo Nan. She also roughly recognized the current situation. She subconsciously struggled for a bit and came out from Luo Nan's embrace. "Thank you, Mr. Luo." The way Clara addressed him was far more distant than on the day they first met. She wasn't in a good state of mind, but she also had the modesty of a woman. She also wanted to save face. The more it was like this, the harder it was to say some words. She was even more unwilling to stay here for too long. She didn't turn around to look at Lan Lin's condition. She bowed once more towards Luo Nan. "I'm sorry for disturbing you. I'll apologize to you later." Clara didn't even raise her head after speaking. She wanted to leave with quick steps. Just as she passed by Luo Nan grabbed her by the arm and pulled her to a stop. "Wait a moment. Don't go yet." This action was more or less the same as Lan Lin's. Clara's heart tightened, and she looked back in shock. The entrance to the restaurant was crowded with people. Naturally, He Donglu wouldn't put himself in danger. He had long since retreated back. He was originally mulling over how to deal with that pretty boy Lan Lin, but when he saw Luo Nan's actions, he couldn't help but join in the fun. He immediately laughed. Look at the trouble in front of you. You want to leave with just a word of thanks? How could it be that easy? This fellow wouldn't be able to sleep if he didn't take liberties with the beautiful girl. It wasn't even a matter of taking liberties. At least Luo Nan remembered that he Donglu was quite interested in Clara during the last rehearsal. So Luo Nan gave him a cold glance. He Donglu immediately responded with a smiling face, appearing to be quite good-tempered. But at this time, whether it was Clara, who was close by, or Lan Lin, who was separated by the crowd, they both recognized this extremely famous crown prince bro in their circle. With Luo Nan's keen senses, he was already aware of Clara's instantly stiffening body and her highly taut mental state. This made her even more terrified and flustered than when Lan Lin had caught up. It was very clear that the young girl's thoughts were crooked. As for Lan Lin, when he saw He Donglo's face clearly, his chest, which was about to explode from being squeezed by a ruthless aura, was like a punctured balloon. In a short amount of time, he became a piece of soft skin. The ground beneath his feet became even softer. He shrunk down the moment he touched the glass door. In his mind, he just wanted to be a dog. He borrowed the crowd of people in front of him to tuck his tail between his legs and hide in a crack in the ground. Oh, Lan Lin subconsciously shot a glance at the restaurant when he thought of a dog, but he didn't see the woman who had driven him here. This sucked away the last bit of strength he had. It was as if his brain had been scrubbed clean. Large expanses of blankness. Oh my. Did I say something wrong? He Donglu really liked this sort of boss, who became the focus and source of everyone's fear. No, he didn't need to act. If he didn't rein in the rope, then this bro would be a devil incarnate. It wouldn't be a pity if he was stabbed to death by a hero. Luo Nan didn't want to stab him to death for now, but he really wanted to give him a kick. This was clearly a very serious matter, yet this silk pants had bumped into a fork in the road. Actually, Luo Nan's thoughts were very simple. He had seriously sized up Lan Lin before, confirming that this person hadn't been infected by the mutant virus. But the homework he had done some time ago showed that there was a difference between an infected person and a carrier. Lan Lin, who was a public figure, was a natural spreader who couldn't control his pants. He was truly a very troublesome source of danger. Though Luo Nan didn't care about the mutant virus infection anymore, Clara was still a friend he had interacted with before. Expanding layer by layer, there was also the BHD group, Hai Jing, and even the circle of relatives and friends like Imoya. Looking at the relationship between Clara and Lan Lin, they should be quite close. If by any chance she was infected, then the problem would be very serious. For the sake of caution, Luo Nan had to do an examination. He couldn't let her leave no matter what. Right when he was having a headache about how to convince the fearful Clara to accept the examination, someone walked over with a smile. She held Clara's other arm. Barbie, don't listen to their inappropriate words. Clara, who was in a state of panic, turned her head when she heard someone call her by her nickname. She saw a woman wearing sunglasses, dressed in a low-key and elegant manner. This face was even more familiar, even though it lacked the powerful aura that she usually had. Sister Wei Wei. The person who had come was actually the first-rate female artist of the company. She was a strong competitor for the future #1 sister, Shi Wei. Only now did Clara recall that Shi Wei was He Donglo's lover. It wasn't unexpected for them to appear here together. Clara looked at the beautiful and familiar face before her eyes. Even though they weren't normally close, Clara still felt a bit emotional. The rims of her eyes immediately turned red. The current Shi Wei wasn't as aloof and cold as she normally was. Instead, she displayed the bearing of the #1 sister of the company. Barbie, you should be happy that you kicked a trash man ahead of time. Okay, if you keep shedding tears, I can't help but question your level of image management. I'm sorry. The stricter seniority relationships in the company as well as the clearer hierarchy made Clara's heartstrings subconsciously taut. Actually, her heart was still filled with bewilderment and fear right now. Shi Wei's appearance didn't lower the intensity of her fear. Instead, it increased it. After all, this wasn't a group occasion in the company. She even hid it from her manager, Hai Jing, in order to go on a date with Lan Lin. It would be great if things really developed like a romantic story. But she was truly alone and helpless in this current situation. It was also at this time that all sorts of facts and rumors within the industry were like demonic winds blowing from all sides. They seeped into every gap in her thoughts. At this very moment, let alone Shi Wei, even if the company's supervisors and directors were here, it would be hard for Clara to think in an optimistic direction. Shi Wei's unprecedentedly gentle tone still lingered by her ears, but it seeped into the bottom of her heart with a dense chill. This is the suburbs. You're in a daze right now. No one will feel at ease if you go home by yourself. How about? Shi Wei originally wanted to drag Clara along to the banquet. Seeing Luo Nan's reaction, Shi Wei had a good impression of this little girl. But when she spoke to this point, she felt that she couldn't overstep her boundaries. She couldn't help but be stuck for a moment. Then someone followed up her words, how about we first get a room to rest for a bit and tidy things up? We can wait for Mr. Luo to finish his discussion and come out. Then we can go back together. Someone pushed open the restaurant's outer door as they spoke. Warm steam came out along with a fragrant wind, blowing away the crowd of people outside. Luo Nan saw that the speaker was a middle-aged woman with a unique temperament. She had short hair similar to a boy's, and she wore a low-cut suit geared towards women. She was a bit unfamiliar. But the person walking shoulder to shoulder with her couldn't be any more familiar. Brother Bamboo Pole. Bamboo Pole beamed as he waved his hand in greeting, you're free today. Come eat a feast. Young master he is treating. Brother, I'm also here to see a friend. Bamboo Pole didn't chat with him in depth. He nodded and gave the initiative of the conversation back to Sun Jiai. Sun Jiai didn't pay attention to the other people present. She walked straight to Luo Nan, bowed slightly, and offered her name card with both hands, Sun Jiai, one of the local supervisors. I failed to control the situation just now and disturbed Teacher Luo. I ask for your forgiveness. Since she called him Teacher Luo, then she was certainly from the inner world. She was also Bamboo Pole's friend. Luo Nan wouldn't treat her badly. He accepted the name card with both hands. He felt that Sun Jiai's suggestion had touched the bottom of his heart. He took advantage of the situation and said, Sister Sun's suggestion is the best. Clara, why don't you rest here for a bit? We can go together later. Luo Nan needed to give Clara a checkup. He also needed to contact He Yueyin or Her Majesty Empress Wu to clearly ask about the follow-up handling of the mutant invasion. He had already instructed Qi Nikuan, who followed by his side, to make arrangements through the Hexa-year. However, he was a bit regretful at this time. He didn't bring Cat Eyes along. Otherwise, he would have saved quite a bit of time and effort. Realistically speaking, Clara's will didn't carry much weight now that Luo Nan had made the decision. Luo Nan was worried that she was overthinking things. He simply flipped through his communications book. How about I get someone to come over and accompany you? Bai Yu and the others are nearby. Cat Eyes. No need. I'm fine by myself. Clara's voice was a bit hurried, reflecting an intense feeling of rejection. But soon she pursed her lips and lowered her eyelids. Her slightly curled hair hung down from her forehead. She really was like an exquisite Barbie doll, allowing herself to be manipulated by others. It seemed that there really was a bit of a misunderstanding. Luo Nan was able to feel that Clara's mental cage was withering and warping. There was still a bit of space that was unwavering. This kind of willpower had already exceeded the norm. Shi Wei continued to display the demeanor of a big sister. She stuck closer to Clara's body and laughed lightly. I can accompany Barbie for a chat. I'm not joking. I've always felt that this is a good thing. Clara didn't open her mouth, so she didn't have any objections. Luo Nan grunted, and He Donglu didn't refuse. He just said, you're done settling things. Hurry up and come over. And so, the matter on this side was settled. He Dong Lu and Luo Nan walked inside, and the crowd of people in front of the restaurant naturally dispersed. As for a certain person who was curled up into a ball by the glass door, who cared? Luo Nan turned his head back. His target was bamboo pole. Bro, do you want to come together? No need. Let's not disturb each other. Bamboo pole giggled and waved his hand. Sun Jie shot him a covert glare, but bamboo pole didn't pay any attention to her. Luo Nan saw all of these small details and chuckled twice. He felt that this was a bit interesting. He really envied bamboo pole's carefree and easygoing attitude. Not to mention that bamboo pole also hid extraordinary wisdom within. Whether it was the depth and breadth of knowledge when bamboo pole taught him, or the penetrating and incisive theses of the order, or the fact that bamboo pole was the first to break through the barrier of nearly 1,500 participants and enter B rank. All of this proved that bamboo pole was extraordinary. The group of people continued to walk inside. He Dong Lu was a young master who loved to step on salted fish the most. He felt refreshed and his mind was lively, so he came over and said, "Since we're friends, let's drink a few cups together. Actually, it's good to have Clara accompany you. We brothers drink for the sake of being relaxed and at ease." Luo Nan cast a sidelong glance at him. He never felt that he had any sort of brotherly friendship with this fellow. They walked a few more steps as they spoke, and 4 diners suddenly stood up at a table at the edge of the aisle. They greeted from afar, "Teacher Luo." He Donglo's words were interrupted. He was stupefied for a moment. Luo Nan blinked his eyes and responded, hello." Luo Nan thought that perhaps they were people who had participated in the training course on the 14th. As for the specifics, how could he remember so many people when there were 1,500 of them? Luo Nan didn't pay attention to this sort of thing. He passed by the table of people. But a mere half a second later, a figure stood up diagonally in front of him. It was originally a single person, but the momentum caused the people at the table to be unable to resist. They subconsciously stood up as well. Teacher Luo. It was still an unfamiliar face. He was 40 or 50 years old, but he was the same as the people at the table in front of him. All of them had respectful expressions on their faces. The confused expressions of the other people at the table were all the more distinct. Luo Nan could only respond, "No need to be polite. You guys eat." Chapter 582. This was a high-class restaurant located on the outskirts of Xia City. It was located in a holiday villa under the banner of the Starry Sky Club. The daily flow of people wasn't large, but it was an important place for the ability users of the inner world and the resource users of the secular society to interact with each other. As time went by, it became one of the high-class circles of Xia City. It must be said that this was a relatively specialized place. However, once the pretentiousness was established, some idiots who didn't understand anything flocked to this place like a flock of ducks. They sharpened their brains to get in. Under the tacit approval of the club's organizers, a considerable number of so-called outsiders came here to spend their money. This could more or less be considered a kind of cover. But at this time, when a quarter of the people in the restaurant stood up and addressed him as Teacher Luo, to express their attitude, any cover would be useless. There were over 100 faces in the restaurant. At least for the first few seconds, most of them were perplexed and curious. But as the 20 or so ability users addressed him in the same manner, these self-righteous but ignorant fellows quickly became homogeneous. They even displayed a more sincere and respectful attitude than those in the know. It could be imagined that in the future, the address of Teacher Luo would become a legendary topic of conversation in the so-called circle along with his extraordinarily tender face. All those in the know and those who didn't know would take delight in talking about it. Such a change made Sun Jie, who had been observing from the entrance of the restaurant all along, subconsciously sigh. The less than 2 hours of teaching on the night of the 14th had introduced an extraordinary character to the world. Sun Jie really wanted to immediately hook up with Luo Nan, but she had to deal with the rotten tail pulled out by that dead dog, Lan Lin. She could only watch as Luo Nan and his party climbed up to the second floor of the restaurant and entered the private room area. She used the fastest speed to finish dealing with the chores. There were no other irrelevant people in the surroundings. Sun Jie finally had the leisure to give Bamboo Pole a sneer. You really aren't going to help me at all. But I didn't tear down your stage. Don't tell me you want me to explain everything from start to finish? Sun Jie really wanted to stomp her 10 centimeters into Bamboo Pole's thick skin. But when she thought about how this fellow still had value, all she could do was roll her eyes. Bamboo Pole smiled and said, "Your dog won't be of much use tonight. Don't tell me you still have feelings for me. Let's be decent to the end. We'll finish the rest of the bottle and go home." Sun Jie continued to sneer, "You don't have to blindly think for me. A living dog has its advantages, and a dead dog has its uses." Bamboo Pole observed a moment of silence for Lan Lin. Then, like a gentleman, he opened the door for Sun Jie and the two returned to their seats. Before he could settle down, there was a sudden commotion on the second floor, and it was quite loud. At first there was the loud sound of a door being slammed, followed by a shrill voice shouting, "One last thing for him, it's better to leave as a martialist than to die at home as a sickly rich man." 5 seconds later, a tall and lean man with a cold expression appeared at the top of the stairs. At this moment, over 100 gazes from the restaurant downstairs were focused on him. This person could be considered a capable person. Even in such a state, he could still stride forward without looking sideways. Soon, he was out of the restaurant and disappeared into the night. There were over 100 people on the first floor. Some recognized this person, and some didn't. Bamboo Pole and Sun Jie belonged to the former category. Duan Hong, the head of the Thunder Falcon Dojo. He was one of the most famous people in Xia City in recent days. Today is the 19th, right? There are only 3 days left until the winter solstice. Sun Jie raised her wine glass. Half of her face was covered by the luster of the blood-red liquid. Only the corner of her lips curled up slightly. It's quite hard to hold that face in. I can hear the sound of his heart venting even from here. It's as if a burden has been lifted from his shoulders. Bamboo Pole used an idiom to accurately describe the situation. A week ago, not many people paid attention to the grudge between the Thunder Falcon Dojo and the Divine Yu Dojo. But a few short days later, the winter solstice duel between the two dojo masters had become a hot topic in the circle of ability users in Xia City. Especially after that class on the night of the 14th, Teacher Luo had become the absolute focus of attention. Every word he uttered was broken down and analyzed. This included some gossip that had nothing to do with the main topic of the class. Back then, Luo Nan had mentioned the words Gym Master Xiao who taught me body techniques. He had also mentioned the Tinder as well as the classification of the basic unit, the central unit, and the expansion unit. These were relatively core concepts of the system. It was also from that night onwards that the name, Xiao Xinyu, rose quite a bit in the eyes of many people. Correspondingly, the Thunder Falcon Dojo, which had a direct conflict with Xiao Xinyu, became the focus of many people. Fine, they were actually the target of ridicule. As long as Duan Hong wasn't an idiot, he would certainly feel the pressure. As for what he would do next, it could be seen now. At this time, a young man chased down from the second floor. He hurried past. Though he was dressed in casual clothes, the two recognized him. He was Zhu Ling, a lieutenant colonel of the Coastal Defense Army. He was Blood Prison Tian Bang's adjutant. He was the standard rising star of the military. It's better to find someone from the military to solve the problem. Bamboo Pole took a sip of wine. He knew that Duan Hong had a military background, but Duan Hong was quite thoughtful to be able to find He Donglu after so many twists and turns. Though Bamboo Pole didn't see the scene, he could guess it. He Donglu mediated in the middle, and Duan Hong got off the slope like a donkey. Duan Hong could give up a favor along the way. Luo Nan would certainly fall for this. After all, Xiao Xinyu really couldn't afford to be tossed around. As for what Duan Hong's final style was, his persona, and what other tricks he would use in the future, it no longer mattered to the overall situation. He Donglu is treating us to a meal. First, he's giving us a favor. He should have some ulterior motive. Sun Jie pondered over the knots within and naturally came to a preliminary conclusion. Does the He family want to take a step further with Mr. Luo? There's no need for He Donglu. Secretary he is enough. Sun Jie's eyes squinted in laughter. That's not necessarily true. Oh, there's an inside story? An exchange? As long as you're willing to help. Go ball. Bamboo Pole didn't say anything. He recognized Sun Jie as a friend, but he never forgot the difference in positions between the two. The Starry Sky Society invited Luo Nan to open a class. It was fine if they just wanted to ride on the limelight. At most, it would be a matter of who earned more and who earned less. Presumably, Luo Nan wouldn't care. But the problem was it really good to have Luo Nan too involved with the Starry Sky Society? For ability users, not accepting missions from the Starry Sky Society was certainly the performance of a rookie. But at the same time, lingering in the society's circle without going was undoubtedly the starting point of depravity. The Starry Sky Society was a circle of the inner world's periphery created by the cooperation of headquarters and several capital powers. The purpose of its establishment was to realize the effective exchange of the value of ability users with the capital of secular society. Since the issue of exchange of interests was involved, it was obviously a super fat piece of meat. Everyone wanted to take a bite out of it. As a result, within this society and its attached organization, there were all kinds of entanglements of interests and dark sides that people couldn't bear to look straight at. And the corresponding hundreds of stimulating temptations were the culmination of human society. Bamboo Pole believed himself to be a layman. He was far from being a moral gentleman, but he was an adult with many years of experience. He had his own sense of judgment. But what about Luo Nan? His terrifying worldview was basically set in stone. His outlook on life and values were still in the developing stage. Even if jade was not cut and polished, it would be useless. That was only true for a rock. If there was a giant fusion reactor in front of him, it would be better not to take the risk. Bamboo Pole swirled his wine glass. He looked relaxed, but he had erected a high defensive line in his heart. Sun Jie was also swirling her wine glass. Her eyebrows and eyes, beneath her exquisite makeup, seemed to cast shadows on Bamboo Pole's face through the swirling wine. It also seemed to drift to a place that was hard to reach. It couldn't be said that the two didn't have any appetite for the rest of the time, but most of their minds weren't on chatting. Another 10 minutes or so passed. Shi Wei, who had gone to help Clara settle down earlier, walked into the restaurant and headed to the second floor. Sun Jie looked at her watch. She used Shi Wei's ascension to the second floor as the starting point. She brought out the last of her patients and waited for another 7 or 8 minutes. Finally, she stood up. I'm going to say hello to Mr. Luo and the others. Do you want to come with me? We agreed not to disturb each other. Sun Jie's exquisitely sculpted eyebrows rose. They were like sharp blades that could chop down at any time. Bamboo Pole shrugged his shoulders, and the words that followed were cut short. Sun Jie ascended to the private room area of the restaurant's second floor 90 seconds later. She had an extremely precise grasp of time. The hot appetizers were just served when she arrived at the entrance of the private room. She entered with the food server. There were very few people in the room. Aside from Duan Hong and Zhu Ling, who had just left, there were only Luo Nan, He Donglu, and Shi Wei. However, no matter how much Sun Jie thought about it, she still didn't expect to see such a scene when she pushed the door open and entered. Shi Wei was at the center of the scene in the private room. This beauty had already unbuttoned the cuffs of her shirt. She folded the sleeves up, revealing her white lotus-like arm. As a superstar, Shi Wei's body was first-rate in terms of talent and maintenance. Under the soft lighting, her arm was like a divine item carved out of white jade. Even though Sun Jie was also a woman, her heart still rippled when she saw it. All right, Sun Jiayi was a famous omnivore in the circle. Her gender was not restricted. Her heart was simply moved when she saw this scene. She even thought that she might add one more person to her prey list later. As for the hedonistic son of rich parents like He Donglu, she really didn't put him in her eyes. The problem was the position of Shi Wei's white jade arm. Wasn't it a bit inappropriate? That white jade arm was stretched out on the table. It was crooked yet not crooked. It was straight yet not straight. It was natural and alluring. The problem was that most of her wrist was grasped in the palm of Luo Nan's right hand. Luo Nan's other hand was like a ruler. He measured from wrist to elbow, and then to upper arm. Please, you're not a fashion designer. What's the point of poking and prodding with your finger? Sun Jiayi's eyes were extremely sharp. She could see from the degree of creases on Shi Wei's clothes that this female star had already pulled out the hem of her shirt. If she were to straighten up right now, she might even be able to see a chunk of her belly. Describing such a scene as disheveled was not a problem at all. It didn't matter if this scene was seen by the food server, but it really wasn't appropriate for a famous supervisor to get involved. Chapter 583. He was really rash. This was the first thought that came to Sun Jiayi's mind. If it were someone else, she wouldn't have made such a low-level mistake. With the standard of her spiritual senses, even if she didn't enter the room, she could still roughly grasp the situation in the room. But the problem was that the person she was facing now was an extraordinary genius who had just come up with the cage theory and guided 1,500 ability users and extraordinaries to battle for 300 rounds in the Abyss region. It was this genius who stated that the majority of mental senses were a conflict between violating and being violated. The winner would take it all, and the loser would die. No matter how much self-confidence Sun Jiayi had, she could only be a violated character in a wrestling match on the mental plane. That was if Luo Nan was interested in her. Sun Jiayi had never thought of investigating the situation inside the private room. Otherwise, she would only be asking to be humiliated. But Luo Nan, who always had a good reputation, actually did this sort of action. It was really unexpected. Fortunately, Sun Jiayi had been on the battlefield for a long time and had the ability to deal with it. Her expression didn't change at all. It was as if she was watching a very normal scene. She continued to speak according to the predetermined sentence. Mr. Luo, young master He, are the dishes today to your liking? He Donglu more or less knew a bit about Sun Jiayi's background. He chuckled and said, not bad, not bad. Especially the appetizer at the front. It's quite creative. Sun Jiayi's spiritual senses were useless, but the method of observing people that she had trained for many years was still effective. She could roughly judge the current mental state of the three people in the private room. The one who didn't care the most was He Donglu. The one who didn't need to pay attention to the most was Shi Wei. As for the most important one, well, he felt that it was a bit more complicated. Awkwardness was not awkwardness, and calmness was not calmness either. It was more obvious that he was at a loss, as if he did not know how to face it. In the end, he returned to a kind of almost wooden indifference. Such a strange reaction made Sun Jiayi mark it in her heart. She wanted to test it again, but the conditions didn't allow it. Luo Nan wasn't someone who was good at conversing. Communicating with He Donglu was meaningless. Sun Jiayi could only exchange a few more polite words before withdrawing. From start to finish, she was gone for around a minute. When he returned to Bamboo Pole's side, Bamboo Pole asked with interest, "How's the progress?" Sun Jiayi replied casually, "Take your time." Bamboo Pole laughed. "Fine. You've entered the door. Go ahead and have your wicked thoughts. I won't accompany you anymore. I'll go back and work hard." Sun Jiayi responded, but when Bamboo Pole got up, she suddenly asked, "Does this Mr. Luo of yours have any special preferences? Do you think I'll tell you?" Sun Jiayi pursed her lips and thought for a moment. She nodded but soon shook her head. "You're not telling me. Is it to keep it a secret, or is it a secret to begin with?" Bamboo Pole was slightly startled, but then he smiled and pointed at her. You're smart, but don't overdo it. This is advice from a friend. Sun Jai bowed slightly in her chair. Thank you, goodbye. Bamboo Pole glanced at her again. His finger slid across his brows, and he performed a nondescript salute before leaving with a smile. As she watched her old friend disappear into the darkness outside the restaurant, Sun Jai lowered her head and thought seriously for a few minutes. Then, in her personal storage space, she opened the information that she had already collected and organized. This included all the information regarding Luo Nan that could be gathered from various channels. It was voluminous and hard to count. It was impossible to comb through all this information in a short amount of time, but Sun Jai already had a clear goal. She used her AI to filter and extract all the information she could find on Luo Nan's social interactions in various situations. This included images and written records. She created a new folder, thought for a moment, and named it Persona. Then, she connected to a secret channel through the internet. Maybe we need to increase the input of the psychological analysis team. Yes, we need it now. Luo Nan wasn't too affected by Sun Jai's entrance in the private room on the second floor, but he never planned on spending too much time on Shi Wei. Not long after Sun Jai left the room, he stopped measuring with his fingers and spoke to He Donglu. Of course it's possible to make a tattoo with extraordinary effects. But from the looks of it, the organizers aren't going to be as straightforward as cutting needles on the female's body. He Donglu raised his eyebrows when he heard this. Of course, it was his request to have Shi Wei undress. In reality, the grand banquet that was coming soon had prerequisites arranged. The participating guests would have to compete in the progress of the missions. Once they won, they would possess high authority in the grand banquet. They could even become the legendary emperor of the party. This would have an enormous effect on raising his prestige in the circle. The theme of this year's grand banquet was Night of Mystery. It was clear that the mystic arts would dominate. It was said that it involved a bit of black magic and the like. The prerequisites for the male guests were uniformly interesting tattoos. They had to be completed on the bodies of their female companions and prey. Victory was determined by quantity. Frankly speaking, He Donglu didn't expect Luo Nan, who was an abstinence type, to be able to solve his problem. He just used it as a gesture of intimacy, but he never expected Luo Nan to take it seriously. Perhaps Luo Nan felt that He Donglu had given up a favor to resolve the problem of the winter solstice challenge in order to send King of Symmetry. Alright, being able to be an emperor for once was certainly an enormous temptation. But I really did come here today to do proper business. He Donglu's heart was indescribably depressed, but he still put on a look of pleasant surprise. You figured it out? Probably. What move is it? Luo Nan thought for a moment, but he shook his head. I don't want to say. He Donglu nearly choked to death on the spot. He swallowed the dry air in his throat with great difficulty. He forced a smile and said, isn't it a bit too early to ponder over the competition for the mission? I'm not interested in the so-called mission. Luo Nan just felt that the organizers of the grand banquet had no lower limits in their thinking. He didn't want to dirty his mouth with those words, so he gave a simple explanation and didn't say anything else. I'll strangle you to death. Okay, I don't even believe it myself. He Donglu choked twice in a row. He wanted to get a bit angry, but when he looked at Luo Nan's wooden and childish face, it was hard for him to make excessive guesses. He could only console himself. Forget it. In any case, this is just the warm-up phase. There will certainly be further explanations in the future. With my resources, even if I can't compare to you professionals, it'll be fine if I put in a bit more effort. He Donglu glanced at the hot plate that had yet to be cut. He forcefully suppressed the emotions in his heart. Just like the main dish that had yet to be served, the theme of tonight's banquet had yet to be truly spoken. If he were to lose his young master's temper at this time, he would be whipped to death by his old man later. Originally, he wanted to wait until they tasted the main dish before entering the topic, but now he had to do it ahead of time. He Donglu grinned and warmed up his facial muscles. Then he immediately took out an exaggerated tone. Professionals. You can't help but admire them. Especially people like you. Just now on the first floor, I've gained new knowledge. It's truly incredible. What's incredible? Shi Wei tidied up her clothes. Her face was smiling like a flower. She was familiar with the venue. She was a very good partner, so she took out her curiosity and inquired at the right time. He Donglu asked curiously, "You didn't see?" "Oh, you went to take care of that little Barbie. That's truly a pity. You don't know this, but when Brother Luo entered the hall on the first floor, at least a third of the people stood up in a hubbub. They all called him Teacher Luo. How could it be like this?" Shi Wei's professional acting skills allowed her astonished and amazed posture to be on point. In comparison, He Dongluo's flattering technique was quite lacking. Plus, he was a layman to begin with. No matter how vivid his words were, it would only make Luo Nan feel awkward. There was no better effect. Luo Nan looked at his watch. Right when he was thinking about whether or not he should give a few words of warning, He Donglu finally ended his introduction under Shi Wei's hint. He rubbed his hands and entered the main topic. "Hey, I'm a layman. There are some things that I can't explain clearly, so I won't say too much and make a fool of myself. I just need to show my admiration. Then let's have a straightforward." The hedonistic young master played with the tone of the Jianghu quite well. Luo Nan felt that these words were more pleasing to the ear than the previous words. He nodded and said, "Just say it. It's like this. I've heard news these past few days. It's about the demonstration equipment related to classroom number 14, demonstration equipment." Luo Nan was stunned. He really didn't understand. It was the day before yesterday or the day before yesterday. You made a few bracelets and distributed them. You said you were experimenting with the dynamo core. A certain person's mouth was full of layman's words, but Luo Nan understood the meaning. For the sake of He Yuan's face, Luo Nan simply corrected him. "That's not a demonstration equipment. It's not a dynamo core either. It's just a test product that simulates the effects of the dynamo core. It's similar to an integrated chip. It's a tool that coordinates the operation of the blood intent ring." He Donglu actually didn't understand, but he seized the opportunity to slap his thigh. "Oh right. It's this. It coordinates the blood intent ring. Speaking of which, brother, do you have any plans to mass-produce this toy?" Luo Nan went, "Oh." He repeated the positioning from before. "This is just a test product. If there's a market, then it's called a product." He Donglu wasn't good at this, but he was used to being a hedonistic young master. He really had a heroic spirit of his own. "Let's be frank. My family wishes to cooperate. Brother, you just need to nod your head, and we'll immediately sign the contract. If there's anything you're dissatisfied with, I'll pull my old man over to talk." Luo Nan responded unhurriedly. "I'm still researching the details. I've been making progress all this time. I've already explained the specifics to Sister Yuan." Cough. "Don't you find my sister's personality troublesome?" "Huh." Luo Nan shot a glance over, and He Donglu immediately put on a wide smile. "I'm saying that her status in the military and the society are already quite subtle. Adding us to the mix, it won't be easy to coordinate. Plus, with her personality, she always has to be within the framework. Isn't it good to be within the framework?" He Donglu nearly couldn't continue. Luckily, he remembered that this aspect was discussed in the rehearsal. He said, "Efficiency. It depends on efficiency. Especially when it comes to your research. It's like the difference between a public laboratory and a private laboratory. If you share a piece of equipment with someone, you have to arrange the time and take turns. Isn't that inconvenient? Plus, the branch's resources are within the framework of headquarters. The two sides don't have a good relationship right now. It's hard to avoid restraining each other. It's hard to guarantee the privacy of some projects. But if you have a private laboratory, Chapter 584. The jeep crushed through the night, speeding along the high-speed magnetic rails on the outskirts of Sia City. Clara was silent the entire way. She was also in a daze the entire way. She only came back to her senses a bit when she saw that they were about to meet the splendid lights of the city. This was due to Bayu's message reminding her. "Where are we? Don't turn around. It's freezing me to death." Bayu's message was followed by an emoticon of teeth chattering and shivering inside an ice cube. Clara couldn't help pursing her lips into a smile. She looked at the night outside and used the virtual keyboard to reply, "We've already entered the rooftop area." The virtual keyboard's luminous effect flickered in the back seat. The little girl always loved to design a few gorgeous colors. She usually felt that they were quite gorgeous, but when she saw the slender figure and the calm and serious face of her peer under the gaudy colorful lights, Clara suddenly felt that the spacious back seat of the car had become cramped. The complicated emotions she had suppressed with great difficulty in the previous half hour were like the flickering lights in the car. They were completely exposed before the eyes of others. At least that was what Clara believed herself to be. She subconsciously held her breath and turned off the keyboard. She wanted to return to her previous state of silence. The person next to her seemed to turn his head to glance at her. It also seemed that he didn't, but Clara felt her entire body become sensitive. Her slightly curled long hair touched the exposed nape of her neck. It was clearly a bit damp. The 20-minute car ride had yet to dry the humidity of the villa's hot spring. It was just like the weeds in her mind. Back then, Shiwei had intentionally or unintentionally hinted that her own fantasies, including her preparations to abandon herself to despair, appeared absurd and lowly in front of the magnanimous actions of her peer, whom she had only interacted with for half a day. Clara still didn't know, or perhaps she didn't want to know, whether or not Luo Nan understood her preparations. She could only hang her head like a quail. She allowed her fantasies and illusions to weave into a net in the darkness, tightly binding her head and chest. She found it hard to breathe. The incorporeal needle of time suddenly sped up and then slowed down, teasing and tormenting her to its heart's content. This feeling, which could only be experienced by herself, seemed to be even more unbearable than the conflict outside the restaurant an hour ago. Until the jeep reached its destination. "That's by you." Luo Nan finally opened his mouth. The jeep cut into the city road as he spoke, slowly stopping by the side of the road. Bai, who had wrapped herself up like a hairy ball, was hopping around under the streetlights. She saw a small tank-like SUV come over, and she subconsciously jumped back a step. Only then did she see the car door open. Luo Nan, dressed in thin casual clothes, got off the car. Clara came down from the other side and circled around the back of the car. Bai immediately pounced over and hugged Clara as she called her idiot over 10 times. Clara originally thought she had overcome the most difficult hurdle, but as soon as she heard Bai's words, the emotions hidden in the corner of her heart broke through the dam. She hugged Bai and started crying again. Luo Nan was truly helpless when faced with this sort of situation. He immediately had thoughts of fleeing far away. He watched as Clara wholeheartedly hugged Bai and cried. Bai came back to her senses a little, so he focused his voice and whispered in her ear, "Your house is nearby, right? Clara, take care of him. Call me if anything happens." Bai was dressed like a hairy ball, and she still had to hold Clara, who was crying so hard that her body went soft. She swayed back and forth, struggling quite a bit. She couldn't help but open her eyes wide when she saw Luo Nan actually shake his hand and leave. But she was unable to criticize him, so she could only pout, "My house is right behind me. Don't you want to go sit? I have an appointment with someone. I'll be leaving first." Luo Nan didn't have the leisure to watch the two girls hug each other and cry bitterly. Plus, he wasn't lying. His daily schedule was packed to the brim. He really did have to meet with an important person in a bit. He turned around to leave, but he saw Bai being hugged by Clara. Bai looked like she couldn't even move a single step. He thought for a bit and finally decided to do something good to the end, "Get in the car. I'll take you guys to your house." Clara, you're going to sleep at your kid's house today, right? Bayou let out a puff of white steam. Oh my, I nearly thought I was going to dribble the ball and run. The young girl had no filter on her mouth, and her analogy was gravely wrong. This actually caused Clara to be unable to continue crying for a time. Luo Nan was helpless. He could only invite the two girls into the car and let Bayou lead the way. They drove to the residential area in the back. Clara was much more relaxed now that she had a friend by her side. Right now, she was curled up in Bayou's embrace. She was no longer crying, but she was a bit drowsy and sleepy. This was most likely the after-effects of her rapidly relaxing mental tension. Clara was between Luo Nan and Bayou, so it wasn't convenient for them to talk. But after thinking for a bit, he took advantage of Clara curling up to indicate Bayou to come closer. He reminded her in a low voice, "She's quite lucky. She didn't suffer a huge loss. Just remember this. Also, I didn't tell Brother Haijing about today's matter. Don't be happy too early." Luo Nan felt stifled when he saw Bayou's relieved appearance. This girl didn't know how many people were tormented by this matter tonight. He coughed lightly. "You guys need to pay attention. Xia City hasn't been peaceful lately. It seems like some sort of virus is spreading. My sister is also in this circle of yours. It really is very complicated. The more you make friends like this, the more cautious you need to be. Otherwise, you'll be caught off guard. I'll help you guys get in touch later. You guys can all go get your bodies checked." Bayou's eyes widened once more when she heard the arrogance of his age and seniority. She hated that she couldn't open her mouth and bite a certain someone. But at this time, God's off-road vehicle accurately stopped outside of Bayou's house. Luo Nan didn't give Bayou a chance to speak. He drove the two girls out of the car and drove away. Behind him, Bayou fiercely waved her fist at the taillights of the car. Luo Nan could only shrug and look at his watch. It wasn't even 9 o'clock in the evening. Their schedule was quite frugal. That's right. Ever since He Donglo's request for cooperation was rejected by him, the rest of the meal relied entirely on Shi Wei's top-notch level of communication. Only then were they able to enjoy themselves to the fullest. The duration of this meal wouldn't be too long. It ended around 7:30 p.m. Then came the examination of Clara and sending her off. Most of the time was spent on the road. Luo Nan sighed and rubbed his head. His thoughts weren't particularly smooth. He felt that it was strange when they talked about cooperation during the meal. The relationship between He Yueyin and the He family seemed to be a bit more distant than he imagined. He Yueyin was clearly the one who transferred the invitation this time as a middleman. Ever since the lecture on the 14th, Luo Nan's private communications had always been in a friend and family mode. Anyone who wasn't in his address book would automatically be rejected. It was all thanks to He Yueyin that He Donglu was able to contact him. And it was because of this that Luo Nan looked down upon He Donglu, or perhaps the He family behind He Donglu, who wanted to start a new business. If it weren't for the fact that the young master of the He family had resolved the winter solstice challenge, Luo Nan wouldn't even be bothered to smile at He Yueyin. Luo Nan pondered for a moment. He felt that he still needed to communicate with He Yueyin. At the very least, he needed to report today's situation. He directly dialed He Yueyin's Hexier number. This time, the call connected very quickly. "Mr. Luo? Sister Yueyin, I've met with He Donglu. The greeting gift he gave me was quite good. He resolved the matter of Gym Master Xiu's Winter Solstice Challenge. However, looking at his intentions, he wants to obtain the technical authorization for the brick, produce it, and sell it on the market." I didn't agree. The so-called brick was the bracelet mentioned during the meal. It was the imitation dynamo core device that Luo Nan had designed for the sake of consolidating the results of the blood intent ring. Why did he choose this code name? One reason was because the blood intent ring's original name was Fortress. It could be considered a brick and a tile when dismantled. The other reason was because Luo Nan was ridiculing himself. the technical content of this toy wasn't high. Luo Nan felt that it wasn't even comparable to the elementary Dynamo core product in Gym Master Shio's Tai Chi Ball. It was barely at the level of the integrated chip that imitated the functions of the Dynamo core and the burner simulator system of Frost River Reality. It had a weak structure, a single function, a low-quality product rate, and a high failure rate. The frame of the blood intent ring was still floating in the abyssal region. It did have a bit of a guiding effect. Otherwise, it would have been too heavy to use as a toy. From Luo Nan's perspective, this brick was the most standard of failed products. It had the backing of the virtual brain system. It had a detailed user manual as a foundation. He had copied and copied, but the first product he created was actually this toy. He himself was ashamed to the point of being flustered, let alone others. So when Donglu brought up the matter of cooperation with this thing, Luo Nan felt that it was a slap in the face from his perspective. Even if Yueyin wasn't there to separate them, he would still pass it in the first instant. Yueyin did not inquire about the reason or the details regarding Luo Nan's decision. This was her special quality that made people feel comfortable. She absolutely wouldn't waste her breath on things that had already happened. She just used the most practical angle to cut in and seek a more appropriate solution. Donglu is just expressing his attitude. There's no harm in refusing. It won't affect the He family's overall attitude. I remember Mr. saying that you wish to further perfect the design of the brick. If the current research and development conditions provided by the branch are able to satisfy your needs, then there's no need to be in a hurry to deliver the results. We can avoid being distracted. Luo Nan felt that Yueyin had spoken to the bottom of his heart. With 2 hours of dinner time tonight, he could do anything. Of course he could cut off the winter solstice challenge. This bit of price was worth it. Luo Nan naturally had to express his gratitude. In any case, I will certainly be indebted to you for helping me resolve Gym Master Shio's troubles. I've spoken to He Donglu. Sister Yueyin, you might as well help me pass on the message. Luo Nan's words actually contained the meaning of, I only recognize you from the He family. It could be considered a small gesture of support. But Yueyin just replied, Donglu only needs to say it once. Besides, this is what the He family should do. Luo Nan didn't understand these words. Then Yueyin changed the topic. Mr. Luo, I've already sent over the latest information regarding the investigation of the mutant infection. It mentions that although Lan Lin is a carrier of the virus, the relevant departments have already made him harmless after the incident at the Municipal Plaza on the 17th of last month. We can basically eliminate the possibility of him becoming a source of transmission again. Chapter 585. It was already 9:45 p.m. by the time Luo Nan walked into the house. The clear sound of the zither passed through the door and entered his ears before he even entered the door. The subtle sound of him opening the door was also completely drowned out by the bright and lively sound of the strings being plucked. It was to the extent that in the living room, besides Roy Wan, who was sitting in a standard posture on the piano stool facing the door, no one else noticed his arrival. A family concert? Even though Luo Nan's mood couldn't be considered all that great, he still relaxed a bit. He quietly changed his shoes in the entrance hall and walked into the warm living room. Right now the entire family was gathered around the sofa in the living room, aside from Luo Nan who had just returned. His uncle and aunt sat on the main sofa, shoulder to shoulder, with their backs against the door. Only the back of their heads was exposed. Mo Peng sat on his aunt's side. He rested an arm on the armrest and swayed back and forth, but his body was sprawled on the carpet. He was very comfortable. But in terms of comfort, it still belonged to Moya, who occupied one side of the sofa and the chaise lounge. This sister didn't have a proper posture when lying down. She didn't have a proper posture when sitting. Her slender waist rested on the armrest. Her long legs were half bent and half straight. She was so idle that it made one's hair stand on end. Yet she still held the guitar. Her fingers and the plectrum plucked the guitar strings back and forth. She was as agile and dazzling as ever. This song was adapted from a classic rock song. Moya had returned to her old profession and was in charge of the melody. Luo Nan listened to this part. The interludes and gorgeous polyphonic interpretation, and even the finger-picking techniques were used. The rich timbre and improvisational variations perfectly verified the high validity of the nickname, Finger Palace. Compared to Moya, Roy Wen sat upright under the cover of Moya's gorgeous melody. Not only was her posture much more rigid, she mostly strummed the strings, and she occasionally broke down the chords back and forth. She also appeared much simpler. However, the metal strings beneath her fingers vibrated slightly. The resonant amplification of the single-panel box allowed the deep and penetrating timbre to be divined out. This was probably the best standard that the mid-range practice guitar in her hands could achieve. What was even more beautiful was the precise control. It could be said that she had firmly grasped Moya's nearly casual and colorful rhythm. So much so that Luo Nan was nearly unable to distinguish whether the rhythm carried the melody, or whether the melody carried the rhythm. The song was quite simple, but it was almost perfect for two guitars. At the end of the song, before Moya could comment, Mo Peng was already cheering loudly and praising, Roy Wen's rhythm is unparalleled. I.O. Speak properly. Luo Shuqing slapped her son's scalp. Mo Peng didn't even have time to complain when Roy Wen stood up from the piano stool. She nodded her head in greeting towards Luo Nan. Only now did the others see Luo Nan enter the door. Luo Shuqing also stood up. She looked up at her watch and frowned. It's almost 10 o'clock. You've been wandering outside all day. How did you learn from Mo Peng? Mom. Mo Peng was just about to prop himself up, but he didn't have any strength left. He was filled with grief and indignation. I go home on time every day. Why aren't you worried that Nanster will lead me astray? Go upstairs and sleep. Luo Shuqing gave her son a light kick. She had the heart to instruct Luo Nan a few more times, but when she thought of the special circumstances her nephew was in right now, she was unable to continue for a time. Luckily, her husband spoke up at this time. It's already 10 o'clock. Roy Wen has practiced the piano for nearly 2 hours. She must be tired. Everyone should go to sleep. Yep. Nan needs to adapt to the new rhythm as soon as possible. You're still young. Learning to enrich yourself and laying down your foundation is the most important thing. You need to calm your heart. Luo Nan obviously knew what his two elders were worried about. He went, yep. He didn't make any empty promises. He was just like he was in the past. He was an introverted and quiet child. If he could really be the same inside and out, then that would be the most gratifying result for his aunt and uncle. Okay. Everyone wash up and go to sleep. Roy Wen can consider going on stage with me this weekend. Moya stood up as well. She grabbed her guitar and stretched her back. She even waved her hands twice in passing, emitting a humming sound. Luo Shuqing couldn't find her daughter pleasing to the eye no matter how she looked at it. Going up with you to swing a sledgehammer? If we really do swing, then we'll be excellent idols. Moya walked barefooted, giggling as she walked upstairs. She was completely unaware that her unintentional words had caused Luo Nan to subconsciously frown. 5 minutes later, Luo Nan knocked on Moya's door. A few seconds passed before Moya opened the door for him. She wore only a thin nightgown and her hair draped over her shoulders. She clicked her tongue twice. What a rare guest. It seems like a certain someone hasn't come to visit since he's no longer lacking in funds. That must be the reason why you ran away from home for nearly 2 months. The corner of Luo Nan's lips twitched as he retorted. He walked straight inside. He wasn't in the mood to joke around with Moya. Moya indicated for him to sit on a chair by the window. She sat on the edge of the bed with her legs bent. She casually fiddled with her hair. What's wrong? You look like you're suffering from a deep hatred. Did you hear some annoying news from your circle? You could say that. It was easy to talk with smart people. Plus, Luo Nan didn't have any misgivings about many things since he exposed a few of his true circumstances. He didn't need to beat around the bush. My circle is fine. But it's best to be a bit more careful when you're in your circle. There's news that there, to be exact, in your company, there's at least one, maybe many virus carriers. HIV. It's even worse than that. Luo Nan extended his hand and gestured at Moya's head. Something that can grow horns on your head, cover your body in scales, and grow a tail on your butt. Moya was stupefied. Then she reacted, mutant? In this era, the threat that mutants could bring about, from reality to rumors, were all sorts of assaults that disturbed people's thoughts. Moya's reaction wasn't out of the ordinary. Luo Nan recalled the information he had just obtained from the branch's data. He felt that it was useless to talk about these things too much. It was most important to let Moya clearly understand where the source of danger was. Your company has already confirmed that the infected and carrier is Ji Cheong. Of course, she's already under control. There's also a suspected case right now. We're currently tracking and controlling it. Yeah. It's that excellent idol, Lan Lin. Ji Cheong? Lan Lin? Moya pondered for a moment. A smile rippled from the corner of her lips. I have a rough idea. It seems that this virus is transmitted through sexual channels. Couldn't women be a bit more reserved these days? Luo Nan choked for a moment. He was a bit speechless towards Moya's sensitivity, but he still had to say what needed to be said. It's basically like this. But we can't eliminate the possibility of other routes of transmission. I'm mainly worried about your band. They don't pay attention to their private lives. According to our intelligence, electroharpies has been quite active recently. You're too close to them. You must be careful. It's best if you rest for a while. TSK. Your circle is quite professional when it comes to intelligence. It doesn't seem like you're messing around. You guys are the ones who are messing around. I don't deny it. Moya spoke casually. She naturally straightened her toes and did a sideways stretch. It was quite normal, but her current attire and posture made the corners of Luo Nan's eyes twitch. Hey, I'm being serious. I'm being very serious too. You want me to be careful and keep my distance. You want me to call for help if I encounter any problems. I want to be a bit less active recently. Isn't that all? Also, do a body check. Luo Nan sent an address to Moya. Make a trip here. Investigate the risks, just in case. You've thought quite thoroughly. A scholar who hasn't seen for 3 days has a whole new level of respect for you. Moya returned to her cross-legged sitting position. Her body leaned forward slightly. Then how did you think about the matter with Roy Wen? Roy Wen? Luo Nan couldn't turn his train of thought for a time. What's wrong with Roy Wen? You arranged Roy Wen's grade in class. Did you pay attention to her studies or her mental state? Luo Nan still didn't understand. She's only been at school for a few days. Is she tired of studying? Luo Nan spent all day with Roy Wen at Acumen College. He didn't discover anything abnormal. He didn't believe that anyone could discover any changes in Roy Wen's mental state. The smile on Moya's face faded. I want to ask. How can a child with only 3 to 4 years of memories keep up with the 7th grade curriculum? Luo Nan opened his mouth to speak, but he was unable to make a sound for a time. That's right. He knew that Roy Wen's relatively clear life memories were only about 3 years. At most, it wouldn't exceed 5 years. And within that time, the laboratory and the fighting arena made up nearly all of her elements. Of course this was abnormal. But Luo Nan knew that Quantum Corporation had installed special equipment in Roy Wen's brain when he rescued her from Jack's hands. It was used to control accidents. Under these circumstances, modifying and erasing memories wasn't something hard to understand. The relevant research of the Xia City branch also showed that it was practically impossible to form a complete personality with 3 to 5 years of memories. So there was reason to suspect that Rui Wen should have possessed a relatively mature behavior pattern early on. It was just that the relevant memories were all erased by Quantum Corporation. Rui Wen's current situation was formed on this basis. With Quantum Corporation's methods, the only way to find out about Rui Wen's past situation was to flip through their database. But there was already a slim chance of completely recovering her past memories. It was useless to tell Mo Ye too much about this complicated matter. Mo Ye's focus wasn't on this. She only has 3 to 4 years of memories, and she only has the ones from the underground fighting arena. This means that Rui Wen's learning foundation is practically zero. Even though she's very smart, it would be very difficult for her to catch up in a short amount of time. What's more, everyone can see that her energy and interest aren't on this. Luo Nan could only admit it. That's right. I don't really understand the situation in your circle. I can only ask you, do you think she'll be able to live a normal life in another 10 years with the current trend? What I mean is that she'll have a normal social circle. She'll become a complete person in society. She won't just live on a certain side. Why do I feel like you're talking about her being a gangster? Though Luo Nan said this, he felt quite diffident in his heart. Rui Wen's current abilities were more than enough to live on. But if she were to live freely in society with a complete personality, Luo Nan couldn't imagine such a scene for the time being. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.